Happy Friday! Welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show. Fun one lined up for you today, sending you into the weekend. Jam-packed with guests, actually. Half an hour from now, Bill Riley, voice of the Utes, will join us from Houston, Texas, where the Utes will be looking to get back in the win column after a 3-game slide. We're going to talk a little Utah hockey. I went to the game last night. Ugh. Kind of ugly. Jerem Jordan's going to join us at noon for some red and blue, talk a little BYU football as the Cougs, still undefeated, are in a really odd situation where the betting line in that game has moved all over the place. And at 12:45, we're going to talk with Lee Sterling about that. Mark Henry to talk Houston Cougars from, he's a Houston insider from down in Texas. Andy Larson, Utah Jazz beat writer for the Salt Lake Tribune at 1 o'clock. The Jazz back in action tonight, looking to get their first win of the season and only the second game of the season. And then an airing of grievances because it's Friday, and that's what we do. Let you get things off your chest. And I have some grievances, sports-related and non-sports-related. James Peterson producing and filling in and helping out today. James, how are you?
Doing well. Yeah, always good on a Friday, like you said. Fun guest list. We're playing some highlights coming into some of the interviews, so we have to forget Utah fans. You're gonna have to forgive one of the highlights we play as we bring in Jerem Jordan for the red and blue segment. Just don't. Please keep tuning in. You'll have to forgive it. You'll have to forgive us for that.
Are you wearing a Pacers jersey?
Reggie Miller. Pacers jersey.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a big Reggie Miller fan.
5-yard penalty.
You don't like Reggie?
I hate Reggie.
Wow. I'm gonna give you a flag.
No,
for that.
the flag is on you, sir, because this is the Sean O'Connell Show.
I have a grievance for me not being able to give you flags.
My 11-year-old self really hated Reggie.
You did? Okay, you got to tell me why.
Because I inexplicably was a Knicks fan. I guess. Because,
you were a Knicks fan. Okay, I didn't know that about you.
The Knicks were on television, and I loved Patrick Ewing, and Reggie Miller broke my heart.
Okay.
In those playoffs, in that Eastern Conference final where he had like the best 17-second stretch in NBA history and single-handedly dashed my hopes.
That's still insane. I know that there's the controversial no call that probably should have been called an offensive foul that helped that, but it's still like it's T-Mac 13 points in 39 seconds in a regular season game. That's why that one's not as big a deal. But it's T-Mac and it's that one that are like, are you serious? That happened?
Yeah, me and Spike Lee were just crying over Reggie Bush.
Reggie Miller.
I'm sorry, Reggie Miller.
Wrong
Reggie. I could not stand Reggie Miller, man. I didn't know that about you. And
I didn't know you were a Knicks fan. So
there was also at that time there was a really terrible Star Trek Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Do you remember that? Did you ever watch that?
No. I never got into the Star Trek.
Any
of the Star Trek series.
Me neither, but Star Trek Deep Space Nine,
Was that awful?
Like, I think right after another show that I liked watching, like The X-Files or something, and there was a character on that show who looked exactly like Reggie Miller.
I'm going to have to look it up now.
His name was Quark, and he was like kind of a nefarious type of individual, and he looked like Reggie Miller, okay? He's an alien with gigantic ears, and he looked like Reggie Miller.
That's fair.
So the whole vibe on Reggie Miller was he was obnoxious on the court, and he was hurting my Knicks, and then he looked like that character. I would only see the first 3 minutes of the episode, and it'd always be Quark up to some mischief. Couldn't stand it. Don't like Reggie Miller.
So I didn't get into non-Jazz basketball till their second finals year in the playoffs, and that was when Reggie was playing the Bulls, and everyone around here was rooting for the Pacers because you'd rather play the Pacers than Michael Jordan. And so my family was all rooting for the Pacers, and so my first Reggie memory that kind of made me kind of fall in love with Reggie Miller, the player, was when he shoves Michael Jordan on the way to making no call, gets to shove the greatest player in the world off to create a space, and as he's coming around the screen, hitting the game winner, and then he's dancing around the other end of the court like, what did I just do? That lit something up inside me, lit some kind of fire inside me that went, I love watching this guy play basketball. So I missed a lot of, until the 30 for 30 came out. I actually had no idea that there was a big rivalry with Reggie and the Knicks. But so I missed all that. I was like 3 when that happened.
I was all excited to have a good show today, and now you've taken me back to 1995.
So,
and
you don't consider yourself a Knicks fan anymore, though, do you? Maybe a little bit. No,
I don't.
It was just when you were a kid.
I went from being a Knicks fan to then being a Heat fan because you're
that's
young,
wild.
Your young sports fan mind does strange things, right?
Yes.
So
you're not aware of that being a no-no, totally taboo at that time.
I was a Knicks fan, and I liked that whole thing. I liked the John Starks, Patrick Ewing especially. Enjoyed Pat Riley, who was the coach, right? And then Ewing retires, and I'm just like, well, my favorite player doesn't play for the Knicks anymore. I don't live anywhere near New York. It doesn't make sense for me to still love that team. And Pat Riley ended up with the Heat.
So you did the opposite thing that most Knicks fans did back then.
And then Alonzo Mourning was another great player who happened to be a Georgetown Hoya as well. And I was just like, yeah, Alonzo Mourning is my favorite player now. So then I jumped on the Heat bandwagon.
Same number even, 33,
exactly.
Yeah.
So then I was a Mourning fan for a little while, and then I ended up just kind of realizing that it made no sense that I was living in Salt Lake City as a not hardcore basketball purist rooting for these East Coast teams.
Yeah.
After my favorite players were done for those East Coast teams. And, I jumped on the Jazz bandwagon because it was so much fun with the John and Carl in the interim there. So, yeah, man. But, like, when I was playing PlayStation, it was as the Heat.
It was as the Heat, okay.
And when I was playing NBA Jam on the old Sega Genesis, it was as the Knicks.
Old NBA Jam.
Yes.
So fun. The Heat are probably my second favorite team.
Okay.
When D Wade, and I liked Mourning a little bit before that too, but when D Wade came on the scene with the Heat, I'm like, okay, I love Dwayne Wade. He became my favorite player. So,
and now you love the Jazz because Dwayne Wade is a part owner.
Yes, exactly. No,
okay.
Jazz have always been number one in my heart, but the last 20 years or so, I've kind of been a Heat fan too.
Next time, wear a John Stockton jersey to the studio or something. Yeah, Reggie Miller. If you want, I can get
my
you.
favorite player of all time, man. I
Reggie
love
Miller's your favorite player of all time?
Yes.
Quark is your favorite player of all time?
Quark is my favorite Star Trek character of all time.
James has got us off to a really bad start today on the Sean O'Connell Show, but it's going to be a great show anyway. Opening segment of the show always brought to you by Alvi Armani. AlviArmani.com will fix those hair loss problems for you. If your hair's thinning out, if the bald spot is growing, let Alvi Armani help you out. Find them online at alviarmani.com. Tell them ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM sent you. All right. Something that we haven't talked a lot about as Utah prepares to go on the road against Houston. Sometimes I feel like the fan base got a little bit spoiled, but this is a situation where I'm going to join all of you in your shaking your fist at the clouds, and I'm going to get my own pitchfork and torch out if Utah can't find a way to win this particular football game in Houston. They are not good. The Houston Cougars are a very vulnerable squad. They've got a high-quality win over TCU, and the matchup math, the transitive property of sports competition, might make you worry about that. However, Utah's a better football team. They've got better personnel. They're a better coached team. Don't roll your eyes while you're driving around in your car. First of all, that's not safe. And stop forgetting that this is a well-coached team. And stop forgetting that this is something that we have talked about with Utah for the better part of 2 decades now, but certainly the last 5, 6, 7 years. Utah is a well-coached team. There have been failures this year in communication between players and coaches, in execution by players, in coaches' game planning, scheming. I think setting practice plans has been potentially an issue. But we're not going to sit here and pretend that this is not a well-coached program, all right? Just because of some issues and mistakes that have reared their ugly head does not mean that when you're talking about Utah football, you throw the baby out with the bathwater and you're just like, oh, no, they stink now. It's been a rough 3 weeks, okay? Really, it's been a rough 4 weeks because you had the bye week in there as well. But there's no excuse for Utah to lose this game. I've said it multiple times on the show this week. You had kind of the built-in excuses these last 3 losses. You've had these scapegoats, these things you can blame the last 3 losses for. If you're coming out of Houston with a loss, you're not going to have anything remarkably specific. You're not going to have anything that you just get to point out and say that was the problem. Because if you lose at Houston, it is like your season is lost, your locker room is in disarray, your coaching staff is somehow disconnected from what has made them good for the last 7 years plus. Losing this game is when I actually do hit a panic button. I haven't done that yet. I have been probably over-apologetic and I've overcompensated in defense of a team and a coaching staff and a program that I feel like we have to remind the fan base sometimes is actually something that you can consistently be proud of here. But like I said, I will light up the torch and I will grab my own pitchfork if this one doesn't. When we talk about must-win games, James Peterson, this is a must-win game. It doesn't really change your outlook just by winning this game. Like a win against Houston doesn't suddenly put you back in the conference championship race immediately. It doesn't elevate you into the top 25. It doesn't cause Aaron Dunn to recommit to the program after he decided to go to USC. It doesn't do anything super concrete in the win column, but a loss is such a yikes.
Oh, yeah.
And we haven't talked about that enough, probably by design on my show at least, because I don't want to be the one who is fomenting rebellion. I don't want to be the one that is, fanning the fires of panic. There's no excuse. You have to beat Houston.
You might have to with the loss here. Yeah, this game might be the difference between making a bowl or not at this point. I mean, there's time and there's winnable-ish games down the stretch still, but the November schedule is looking to be much tougher than the October schedule was. And if you lose all of your October games, the November games, I mean, you got Iowa State still, you got BYU still, you got a sneaky good UCF team good, and maybe even a UCF team left on the road, and maybe even a sneakier good Colorado team. Weirdly sneaky good Colorado team, because no one's talking about this Colorado team that's actually pretty good versus after last year, everyone talking about this mediocre Colorado team. That's what's coming up in November. It's going to be hard to find 3 wins in November, or 2 wins in November.
There's a really good chance. Well, there's a decent chance. Depending on what happens with UCF this weekend, we'll see.
Yeah.
They've got BYU.
That looks like the
but it's not
most
unlikely.
Winnable game left.
It is not unlikely that Utah is a favorite for the last time this weekend in the 2024 season. You're not going to be a favorite against BYU, even if BYU stubs their toe against UCF. There's a strong chance that, especially since you're on the road at Colorado, you're going to be an underdog there. Of course, that'll be after the BYU game. If you can somehow pull off the win over your rival, then maybe that changes, and we don't know what's going to happen with Colorado before November 16th. And then, look, Iowa State's rolling. I don't expect them to stop rolling, although I don't think that anyone finishes this Big 12 conference slate undefeated. And it would take a pretty significant collapse for Iowa State by the time you face them November 23rd to be lower on the ladder than you are right now.
Yeah.
So they've got Texas Tech, Kansas, and Cincinnati. Texas Tech, I think, whatever.
They're still undefeated in the conference, but probably not as good as how they've played so far.
So look, there's a chance, there's a good shot that this is the last time you're going to see yourself favored, and I know how much that means, right? Like, underdogs have been winning all over the place in college football, but this is a Utah football team that we don't really know how bought in, how reflective they are of the culture that we've gotten used to. There's some leaders, and it was encouraging, I think, to talk to Mekhi Bernard on the show yesterday in the Bernard Breakdown, which is going to happen every single week now.
Bernard Breakdown.
It was encouraging to talk to him and to hear, at least the upperclassmen leadership perspective on what has happened and how he can keep it together. And I believe him when he says it because his play reflects it.
Yeah.
And if it had been Brant Keithy saying those things, I would believe him too. If it had been Junior Tafuna or Van Fillinger, I would say the same things. But what about the younger guys? This is a game of existential importance for Utah because this is the transfer portal era. Nobody on that roster came to Utah, developed at Utah, spent time at Utah. Nobody did so with the expectation they would ever be on a 4-loss team or a 5-loss team. There's not a guy on the roster. And I know that's true of every team that loses, but Utah, as much as we wish this wasn't the case, Utah is not. They don't have the brand cachet that like Alabama's got. Alabama is going to be able to survive the issues they've got with Kalen DeBoer right now and his growing pains as a first-year head coach because they're Alabama. Their NIL fund is bottomless and willing to spend. And right now they have the number 1 recruiting class in the country because they're Alabama. Utah doesn't have that. Utah needs consistency. You need to be able to sell recruits, parents, transfer portal players on, hey, you come here and you're always going to be in the hunt. If you somehow lose on the road at Houston, you have played your way not only out of the hunt, which is probably already the case here in 2024, but you've played your way out of the mindset of the conference. You've played your way out of the consciousness of a college football recruit, a college football fan. Like, if you can't beat Houston, then you become an anecdote, an afterthought, oh my gosh, what happened to Utah this year?
The way that I've been talking about Kansas all year on this show.
Yeah.
That's what people will talk about with Utah. They probably already are.
In some respect, they already are, but you will cement that status if you lose at Houston. And this is not a positive approach to the equation or the problem today, but I just don't want to have to come back on Monday and be like, well, now I care. Like this game, I'm letting you know, this game is like the inflection point. This is the biggest game since Utah's first Pac-12 championship appearance. This is the most important game in terms of Utah football culture since that game. Because when you made your first appearance, that was against Washington, right?
Yeah.
In a Pac-12 championship game. That was like, aha. Now they're actually here. Now they're actually at this point where we have to respect and talk about and consider Utah when you're discussing power players on the national scene, on the Power 5 football scene. If you are a conference championship contender in that Pac-12 conference, even in its worst years, the Pac-12 conference was still a player, right? This game, I would make the case that game was a moment where Utah football didn't have to look back after that.
Yeah.
And this game could be that moment on the opposite end of the spectrum. If you go down to Houston against a offensively hapless and hopeless and ridiculous Cougars team where you are more talented, where you have the longer tenured coaching staff, where you have a more experienced roster, even if you're playing and starting your freshman quarterback, you have to win.
Absolutely.
Must win is thrown around way too much, But this is a must-win game for the University of Utah.
Do a little DP show thing. Most must-win game of the year for Utah.
It really is.
It feels like it. And to your point, you haven't quite said it, but you've been alluding to these things have ripple effects beyond one season.
Well, this
could potentially be the case if they lose to this Houston team tomorrow.
The what have you done for me lately instant gratification atmosphere in college sports right now makes it so a game like this, if we were having this discussion in 2017, which is the last time Utah went on a 4-game losing streak, you'd be like, you know what? It's unfortunate that this is where you're at, but there's some promising young players on this roster. And I believe that they're going to right the ship, and I believe that Kyle Whittingham and company know exactly what it takes. You could have that discussion in a more realistic sense. When you try to say those things now about a team having a bad individual season, you know what? There's a lot of youth on this roster. That's true. You're asking a lot of some young players and some guys that are new to the program. That's true. But there's nothing even remotely close to a guarantee that whatever promising young talent you have in the building is going to be here in spring, much less next season.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when you came into the season as a conference championship favorite and a playoff and a favorite to get one of the 12 playoff berths. The preseason expectations play a whole lot into this too. If they had not been the pick to win the Big 12, one of the top 3-4 teams to win the Big 12 even in preseason, and looked at to be a playoff team in preseason, it might be a little forgivable to have a season like this. But because in the context of they were supposed to win the Big 12 and it ends up being a 4+ loss season, that can weigh on you, especially if you miss a bowl game. Like, that can really have some bad ripple effects going forward.
If someone comes to me and says, explain for me why Utah lost to Arizona and why Utah lost to Arizona State and why Utah lost to TCU, I could, using some of the same excuses I've cited in the last week on the show, I could tell you, at least give context to why it happened against Arizona. I could give context as to why it happened against Arizona State. And by the way, in doing so, I would have to mention some of you probably should have taken some points and kicked some field goals when you didn't do so. And then, against Arizona State, you really needed to pull Cam Rising at halftime, I think, because he clearly wasn't good to go. And you put too much onus on the player to make that decision for himself and for your whole team. And then against TCU, right? I mean, I don't love that Andy Ludwig's the one who fell on the sword, but he did, so you can say, well, disorganized play calling, and clearly, your play caller, your offensive coordinator, was in a bad spot because he stepped down after that. I cannot, if there's a loss to Houston, I will not be able to explain to a Utah fan, to a neutral party, to whatever, I will not be able to explain to you why this team lost without it just being something that guts me.
Yeah, that they're just not very good.
And that's
really the only thing you can point to. Maybe
Utah
they're just not very
culture, good. Utah football culture and Utah football's recruiting pitch and Utah football's identity is say what you want. It's not going to be like as sexy of an NIL deal as you're going to get from USC, but you're going to be physical. You're going to be badass. You're going to be good.
You're going to have a shot
Utah.
At the NFL.
You're going to have
a shot to get drafted.
You're going to have an opportunity to achieve the things that you get into college football for if you come to the University of Utah. And the selling point gets impossibly hard if you go down and drop a game to Houston. They stink offensively. Now, defensively, they're pretty okay. They're better defensively than they are offensively. This is not going to be the get-right game for your passing offense, at least on paper against Houston. Now, they're vulnerable against the run. They're right in the middle of the conference against the run. And your strength, obviously, is in the run game right now. But anyone who's just like, all right, well, Andy Ludwig's gone, and now Mike Bajakian's going to wave his magic wand over the freshman quarterback, and that's how this passing game is going to get ignited. Houston is like the third best passing defense in the conference. They're the third best total defense in the conference. They're good against the pass. This is not a game where you get to say, ha-ha, we will fix all of our offensive woes here. This is a game where you're going to rely on the fact that they stink offensively. They stink out loud offensively, Houston does. If you have double-digit missed tackles against Houston, you have to bench every starter who's responsible for those missed tackles. This game is must-win in the worst way. So that's a fun way to start your Friday show, huh?
Yeah.
Our show today and every day brought to you by Les Schwab Tires. Les Schwab has the tires, the wheels, the accessories for whatever it is you drive. Stop by a local Les Schwab today and let the professionals there get the job done right the first time. We'll take a quick one here. We'll come back with Bill Riley, the voice of the Utes, on ESPN 700.
23-yard field goal coming here. Kyle Lemmerman, true freshman. Only 6 of 10 on the year with field goal. Snap is high, it's down, the kick is up, and it's blocked! It's blocked and loose! And the Utah defense and special teams has come up big again.
That's a highlight courtesy of the Utah radio broadcast. And, of course, the voice on that call is the voice of the Utes. And my next guest, Bill Riley, joins me from Houston. Bill, how are you?
Not in Houston. Getting ready to head to Houston, though. I'm good, Sean.
Getting ready to head to Houston. I always forget that your timeline is basically the same as the team departure timeline. So, anyway.
That is correct.
All right. So, getting ready to depart for Houston, Bill Riley will be on the call as Utah tries to avoid their first 4-game losing streak since 2017. Bill, you and I haven't had an opportunity to talk about the Andy Ludwig news stepping down Sunday night after a 3-game skid where offense has been a major issue for Utah. Well, your thoughts on Ludwig, who has been incredible in his most recent tenure at the University of Utah, surrendering his duties?
There's no easy answer to this. I don't think Andy Ludwig, whose offense has averaged almost 40 points a game in 21 and 22, just all of a sudden forgot how to coordinate an offense. I think it's a conglomeration of a lot of things that have happened this year, the rising injury kind of being the fulcrum to all of it. And so I think what happened is Andy probably just felt a lot of frustration, probably felt a lot of responsibility for what was going on. And as an offensive coordinator, probably was having trouble trying to fix what the problem was. And maybe just decided he wanted to step aside and let a new voice come in. And, sometimes that new voice will help. People say that all the time. Well, you need a new – sometimes you do, but maybe that's not the point either. But I think Andy felt probably some frustration and some responsibility for the lack of production on offense, and probably felt like him stepping aside might be something that could help it. I guess we'll find that out tomorrow.
The new voice thing it's just an interesting thing. And I asked Eric Weddle about it. I asked Nate Orchard about it. I asked Mekhi Bernard about it. And nobody seems really bought in on this team needing a new voice that isn't the Andy Ludwig voice. But here it is. That's the situation you are in, and now it's Mike Bajakian's show. How different do you expect the offense to look from a schematic and strategic standpoint?
I don't think it can look wholesale different, Sean. I think maybe the way they decide they want to lay out a game plan and the way they want to attack and maybe set Isaac Wilson up might be a little bit different. But you can't change what you are and what you've practiced and what you've been for years in 4 days. So I don't think the look's going to be markedly different. Maybe the way they approach things from a play calling standpoint might be a little bit different. Maybe getting some other people involved or giving some other people chances, because, again, I'll go back to this. You want to lay the blame at Andy Ludwig's feet, go ahead, but it's not all Andy Ludwig. You want to lay it at the freshman's feet? Well, that's not fair either. Sure, he's not been he's not been all conference level, but he's not been horrible. Everybody, Sean, everybody, teammates on the field, offensive line, wide receivers, they've got to help the quarterback and the offense out too. And so maybe you give some guys opportunities, or you line them up and give them a few more reps based on what they did in practice, not based on what their reputation is. I don't know. I think you're going to see some tweaks tomorrow, but I don't think it's going to be wholesale changes.
One of the things that a lot of folks want to see more of is touch distribution, ball distribution to the weapons that have yet to be utilized this season in the offense. And that's way easier said than done, as I'm sure you're well aware. You can't just magically create more plays. You can't just magically wave a wand over Carson Ryan and make him catch touchdown passes and get Caleb Lohner 10 targets a game and things like that. But, I think there is a valid question as to, hey, why hasn't there been more focus on, spreading the ball around? Do you have a good answer for that? Why the offense has been reduced to hey, Mekhi Bernard's going to be productive, and we're going to try to get it to Singer a little bit and try to get it to Keithy a little bit, Money Parks every once in a while. But we came into the year talking about the embarrassment of riches, especially with the pass-catching options, and it hasn't translated that way.
I don't have an answer for it, to be honest, Sean. I don't. maybe it's guys on the field that are producing. It's amazing to me that Landon King, who last year had a really nice kind of entree to Utah football, and then I thought he might be a guy that could be a 30, 35 catch guy this year. Doesn't have one. Doesn't have a catch. I don't know if he's been targeted maybe more than once. So I don't know what that is. I do know that tight ends, and Utah's got a bunch of them, when that offense was really humming in 21 and 22, it was Dalton Kincaid, it was Brad Keithy, but it was also Cole Fotheringham. Yeah. There's a lot of easy throws that you can create for a quarterback with tight ends. Scott and I used to joke on the air, Cole Fotheringham had like one route. He'd go down 7 yards and turn around, and Cam Rising would find him for 2 or 3 times a game. That's easy money in the bank. I don't think we've seen that once this year. So I'm wondering if maybe you play to your strengths just a little bit more, maybe that short, quick passing game, instead of trying to develop longer plays down the field, get those tight ends involved. We've seen Money Parks and Dorian Singer can run those short crossing routes. Get Mekhi Bernard involved too, and maybe Dijon Stanley. We saw Stanley early in the season, but maybe instead of trying to take those shot plays, you utilize that personnel and maybe get that short, quick game that, Isaac can get that ball out of his hand pretty quick.
Bill Riley, voice of the Utes, is our guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking about the road trip coming to Houston. Utah favorites on the road against a Houston team that has been just really, really bad offensively, especially. And because of the matchup and because of the backdrop of coming off back-to-back losses and the expectations coming into the year, Bill, I might be over-indexing, and I trust you to tell me if I am. This is a must-win game in the worst kind of way for Utah. I know that's overused, and I know that's cliche, but I think if you can stop the bleeding now and if you can perform well the rest of the year, we look back and we say, that was a weird 3-game stretch. That was an ugly 3 weeks, but Utah football is still Utah football, and the culture is intact and everything's fine. If you lose this game, I think bigger questions start to come into play than I've been willing to ask, at least to this point, even with the back-to-back losses. Am I overemphasizing the importance of this game? It feels like you absolutely, unequivocally have to win it, or big things are falling apart for Utah.
Well, I mean, let's just say with this season, if Houston's this weekend, Sean, November is BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, and UCF. Mm-hmm. 2 home, 2 road. All of those teams are better than Utah right now.
Yes. 2
of those teams are top 15 teams right now. Colorado is really good offensively, and they look like they're getting a little bit better defensively. And UCF has talent. They're kind of a hard team to figure. Some weeks they look good, some weeks. But that's a road game Thanksgiving weekend. I'm not even going to go big picture with you. I'm just going to stay with this season. If you stumble tomorrow against Houston, it's going to be tough. The month of November is going to be really difficult.
Yeah. If you blow out Houston the month of November, it's still going to be difficult.
Yeah. It's going to be difficult either way, but it will be much more difficult if you haven't kind of fixed those problems in a game against an opponent that's really, to be fair, they're in a rebuild mode this year. Willie Fritz is a first-year head coach. They blew out Dana Holgerson. They've got 68 new players on their roster. So this is a team that, Willie Fritz is a really good coach. He's won everywhere he's gone. He made Tulane a New Year's Day 6 bowl team a couple of years ago. They beat USC in a bowl game. He's a good coach. And when you don't have to leave, you can jump in your car and recruit. You don't have to hop on an airplane to recruit in Houston. That program's going to get better, I think, under Willie Fritz. But right now they're in a little bit of flux. So to me, if you're Utah, your program overall is in better shape. You've got some issues you've got to fix. Defensively isn't one of them. Special teams have been pretty good. The kicking game at least has been. But you just have to figure out a way. Now, Houston's been pretty good defensively. They haven't been great, but they've been pretty good. But you got to find a way to score some points. TCU a week ago coming in, I know they came off a bye week, but they were giving up 30-plus points a game. And Utah got 7 at home. So they didn't reach the red zone once. That's the crazy part. They didn't even hit the 20-yard line. They had the one big pass play, but that was it. So to me, regardless of where you're at in the big picture for it's just this year. You've got to find that way to do it, and maybe Mike Bajakian this week being a new voice, bringing a little bit of energy to the room, lifting these guys up. Maybe that'll jump to start the offense. I guess we'll see.
Bill Riley for another minute or two here, voice of the Utes on the Sean O'Connell Show. Nobody gets great access to the team and to practices anymore. You get better access than most, and look, Isaac Wilson, he's a freshman, and my expectations for him are colored by that because this time last year he was chucking it around at the best high school team in the state. It's a tough thing to ask a guy to just jump in and to adjust to the speed of the game and to know his responsibilities and to also be a leader on top of that. I think he's done a decent enough job. But if Isaac Wilson's performance doesn't improve in the Houston game, again, a team that's not that bad defensively, but if your offense is going to get right, the quarterback has to get right. Will there be a conversation about what else you have behind Isaac Wilson, or is it just the young man or bust? We're just going to go with the growth prospect here.
I can't see them making a change unless something really cratered out badly, like a 4 interception, where you felt like his confidence and his mind was being hurt by continuing to play, like you were doing long-term damage. And I don't get that sense now. What I get the sense is he's just a freshman quarterback who's learned. I mean, this would have been different, Sean, if he was a freshman quarterback, but he was the plan all along.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
For sure,
like,
yes.
Like he was, Cam Rising left, and they love Isaac in the spring, and they're going to put if they would have been, if he would have been the man all fall camp long, then it's different. You're building your offense around him. Not that he's markedly different from Cam, but he's getting the reps. He is just going through freshman growth right now. Does he have to get better? Of course he does. He said that every week and all that other stuff too. But and again, I don't know because I don't sit in the coaching meetings. You're right. I get a little bit of access. I get to talk and stuff, but they're not revealing state secrets to me. But if Isaac's the guy and I get a sense that they really like his mentality and his attitude, then I think you're riding with him, if that makes sense. I just think, you're probably not going to win a conference championship this year. The numbers are stacking against you right now. So I think what you're doing the rest of the way is giving this young man all the time that he needs to grow with his teammates and get the reps that he needs. So, he goes into the off season with some confidence, but more importantly, with a lot of experience.
Do you like the fact that there's a second bye coming for Utah, especially if you can, get back on a winning streak or get one win under your belt, and then you got to sit out a weekend? I don't know if I love that. I
do. Right now, yes. This team, even if they beat Houston tomorrow, Sean, they've got a lot of things they need to work on. The offense isn't going to become the 21-22 offense tomorrow. I think having that week before your gauntlet in November, and maybe more importantly, the BYU game coming up on the 9th of November, could be really, really good for this team. So I don't mind. I mean, if they were winning and they were rolling and they were healthy, because that's the other thing. They've been battling injuries too. I'd say, no, man, keep that momentum going. But I think having the bye next week might serve them pretty well. Let them get healthy for November. Let them have another week of preparation and getting ready for the BYU game. So I don't actually this year, I don't mind it.
Our conversation with Bill Riley brought to you by Advanced Windows. What's going on with Advanced Window products, Bill?
Well, they're just simply the best window company in Utah and probably one of the best window companies in the country. They're a local company, Sean, right here, 36 years in business. They put window treatments, shutters, and blinds in my home. I can assure you when I need windows, I'm going to go to Advanced Window Products. But I've talked to so many people that have heard me talking for the last couple of years on the radio about these guys. They've used them. They've loved them. And the best part of it is they guarantee their work for life. So if you get an Advanced Window and 15 years down the road, something happens, they're going to back that up with a warranty and come out and take good care of you. They don't farm the work out. All of it's made and done right here in Utah. So you can track it. From the minute they come out and measure your windows in your house to the time they come in is usually about 8 weeks. So, by the way, now would be a good time to call them if you've been thinking about it. Get those windows in before it gets really cold. but you can track it the whole way. You don't have to worry about them being on a slow boat from the Pacific somewhere. They're going to do it right here. So Advanced Windows plus our friend Nate Orchard, Jake, and the entire crew over there are great people. They'll take good care of you. So next time you need windows or window treatments, I cannot recommend these guys enough. It's Advanced Window Products.
801-850-9100, $2,500 off 10 windows or more during the college football season. Tell them OC and Bill Riley sent you. Thanks, Bill.
Hey, talk to you next week, Sean.
The voice of the Utes, Bill Riley, headed to Houston, not already in Houston, headed to Houston. All right, some of your reaction on our text line, and I went to the Utah Hockey Club game last night against the Colorado Avalanche. A poll question has come out of my observations there. We'll get into that, and also, where'd the goal scoring go? What happened? Sean O'Connell Show, ESPN 700. The hot lunch on the Sean O'Connell Show, brought to you by Lemon Shark Poke. The OC Bowl is coming to the menu. It was confirmed yesterday. I put out my mad scientist creation. Sustainably, responsibly sourced, quality fish. It is fresh. It is delicious. You know how you tell? Walk into a poke restaurant, walk into a seafood place, walk into anywhere where there's a lot of fish. If it smells real fishy, not what you're looking for, okay? If it smells blank, if it smells like the other food that is being cooked and prepared, like the Kahlua pork sliders that you had, that's a good sign. Also, Lemon Shark Poke locally sources their vegetables, so you could throw the cucumbers in, you could throw the edamame in, you could throw all these things in to the poke bowl, and you know that it came from a local fresh spot. So, right here on Broadway, right here on 300 South in downtown Salt Lake City, on the bottom floor of the Judge Building, Lemon Shark Poke, sponsor of the Hot Lunch.
When do we get the big reveal on what's in the OC Bowl?
I think that
are we not ready to do that?
I think they're going to bring it in next week. Actually,
Okay.
I think we're going to do like
Okay, stay tuned for that.
yeah, I think we're going to have a little YouTube reveal, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, I can't wait for that.
And I'm just going to be like, I'm going to be honest. I'm excited they're putting an OC Bowl on the menu.
Yes.
But I'm not just going to eat that. I'm going to keep ordering other stuff, too, because their menu is excellent already.
Yeah, and if you're not into fish or poke, they've got other great hot options, if you will, with the bento boxes.
Little spam musubi, you're not getting that most places. You can't go to the grocery stores here in Salt Lake and grab a spam musubi. You can go to Lemon Shark Poke and grab a little handheld spam and
Great
rice
spot.
and seaweed.
I just want to know, are they going to put a big picture of your face on the menu next to where they list the OC
Let's
Bowl?
hope not.
There needs to be something in this store.
If they do, I hope they use the one from the billboard that is literally 10 years old.
Yes. Let's do that.
From the Sean O'Connell Show billboard on I-15 and right here on the side of our building, that is a picture that is legitimately 10 years old.
Or should it be one from your fighting days where your bloody face?
No, that would be cool, actually. I don't know how appetizing that is for people. Jerem Jordan is going to join us at the top
I'll
of
take
our
the
second
bloody
hour.
face bowl.
For some red and blue, we'll talk BYU, who is still undefeated after the late game heroics of Jake Retzlaff and Darius
Still
Lassiter.
can't believe they pulled that off, OC.
I can.
I
Oklahoma State stinks,
no,
dude.
no. Going into the game, for sure, I thought that'd be a pretty comfortable win for BYU. But in that drive, especially at 4th and 8 on their side of the field, I was like, I don't think this is happening for BYU. And then, 2 plays later, they're in the end zone.
I have seen too many 4th down conversions by BYU on last-minute drives to be disbelieving of it. All right?
That's fair.
Lassiter might not be Austin Collie, but he's pretty dang close. He's a very good player.
Yeah.
All right. I went to the Utah Hockey Club game last night. They ended up losing 5-1. And this one was different for me because they played the Colorado Avalanche, all right? Avs started the season horribly, but they've got an MVP caliber player on their team in McKinnon, and they're on a hot streak now, and they got even hotter against the Hockey Club where you had Vejmelka in goal, so Ingram – that's like a game and a half now that Ingram has been sitting. So, yeah, Veggie was in goal. He did not play well. The defense in front of him did not play well. They just looked overwhelmed, outclassed, outsized. And this Utah Hockey Club is going to be fun to watch throughout the season. That game was not super fun to watch. And it brought up another question for me. There were a ton of Colorado Avalanche fans. Now, for a lot of hockey fans in the state of Utah, I think the Avs were like their de facto team because that's as close as you can get professional hockey, right? The Avalanche are in Denver. That was before the Golden Knights came in, and the Golden Knights are a little bit closer. And
they've obviously grown a pretty good fan base here in Utah since they joined the league.
And the San Jose Sharks are just a little bit further away than the Avalanche are, but I think that's probably why the Avs fans, these are real Avs fans. They knew what they were watching. These are people who had the sweaters, the jerseys. They're not just there to root against the Utah Hockey Club. They're actual Avs fans. And I was like, wait, what? is this what we're going to do if professional teams are coming to Salt Lake City? I was a Sharks fan growing up. My grandma made me a Sharks fan growing up. I got some Sharks gear. I've got a couple Sharks sweaters. I've watched a bunch of Sharks hockey. As soon as Utah Hockey Club was announced, Sharks immediately, for me, take number 2 spot. I'm not telling you that's how you have to feel about it. That's how it happened for me. So I put the poll question out about how it applies for hockey fans here. And I think I extended, at least in my own mind, well, what about when baseball comes? People here have baseball teams that they're already loyal to, that they've already bought the gear for. If we get a baseball team in Salt Lake City, are people going to be like, yeah, well, I like the Cutthroats or whatever they end up being called, but I'm still a Dodgers fan. Like, Alonso's still going to be an insufferable Dodgers fan?
I think he will.
He's not going to give up his lifelong loyalty.
Because Alonso, he has lifelong loyalty to the Dodgers, but he also claims L.A. more as his home than he does here, even though he's spent more time of his life living here. So there's that dynamic that I'm sure is not unique to Alonso around here. Me personally, Red Sox fan. Red Sox will always be number 1. But
hold on,
you'll
be a Red Sox fan even if we get a hometown team.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
So now, 82% of the votes on the hockey question. Do you automatically become? Does the Utah Hockey Club automatically become your favorite team in the NHL, or do you stick with previous allegiances? Utah Hockey Club, 82% of the vote, already the number 1 team for people. The number 2 answer is 9.4% of the people say, well, Utah Hockey Club is number 2 behind my old favorite team, which is, I think, probably the case for the Avs fans that were there last night. And then 8% say no love for the Utah Hockey Club, period. That might be colored by distaste for Ryan Smith and that whole situation.
Or maybe they're disgruntled Coyote fans.
Could be. Probably not. There were 5,000 Coyote fans, all right? I don't think many of them live in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, man. No, this was also a theme when the Bruins came to town. I was not able to go to the game, but I read some of the articles that came out after it, and there was one that was about the amount of Bruins sweaters in the stands and Bruins fans and how not all of them were coming from New England. There was quite a few from Utah, and so they were talking about. They asked this question in the article: Is this going to be the case for especially some of the traditional teams, the original 6 teams and whatnot?
Maybe. Well,
it could be the case.
There were a lot of Blackhawks sweaters the night that they opened, but not nearly as many as there were Avs. Like when the Avs scored,
it sounds like that was the case with
night,
the Bruins game too.
There was a big pop, right? There was a big pop. So I don't know, man. I understand if that's a lifelong allegiance. If you're like, if we got an NFL team in Salt Lake City, I'm not jumping off the Niners bandwagon immediately, probably. Especially if they were an NFC team, that would cause real dissonance. It'd be very difficult for me.
Yeah, it kind of becomes when they're not playing that night, or when they're not playing my favorite team. When my favorite team's not playing that night, or when Salt Lake's not playing my favorite team, I have another team to root for. That's kind of how it will be for me in baseball, and I'm sure that's how it is for the hockey fans here.
I think there are probably more people who have a favorite baseball team already than people have a favorite hockey team already. Utah was not a hockey market before this, and now they are. So we're seeing the dark underbelly of the Avs fans coming out. I didn't love that, but
you're like anti-Denver sports all around.
Yes,
right.
I'm kind of anti.
Except for you kind of grew up a Colorado fan.
I'm a little bit anti-Denver all around, if we're being honest.
Okay.
Because Denver, Salt Lake is what the rest of the country thinks Denver is.
Yeah.
Like we are the cool mountain city. We're like the gateway to the outdoors. We are like the outdoorsy hub. We should have all 4 of the major sports teams. We should have like the infrastructure that Denver has. We got a way better airport situation.
Yeah, why don't you just give us the Rockies? Just give us the Rockies, Denver.
When people think about what Denver is that have never been to Denver, the picture in their mind's eye is Salt Lake City.
Yeah, especially because they watch Dumb and Dumber and they think, oh, that's Colorado. No, it's Park City and Salt Lake City.
I can't tell you how many people I've talked to, and even the first time I went to Denver,
California.
I was just like,
beautiful.
Wait a second. Where's the mountains? You land in Denver, and you're just like, I thought this was like the Rocky Mountains.
Way out there.
It's like, oh, yeah, they're 2.5 hours that way. It's like, what? No, Salt Lake City is what people think Denver is. So, yeah, I'm like.
Send the Rockies here. We'll call them the Wasatches. How about that?
That's not a great. Doesn't roll off the tongue. All right. We got red and blue coming. BYU still undefeated. And somehow the line has moved in odd ways this week. Why is BYU flirting with the top 10? Not a huge favorite on the road against UCF. Maybe Jerem Jordan has an idea. We'll talk with him next on ESPN 700. Big thanks to ESPN for that highlight. Retzlaff to Lassiter game-winning touchdown last week against Oklahoma State, and the magic continues for Kalani Sitake's BYU Cougars, who have an interesting one this week on the road at UCF. Jerem Jordan, BYU TV, kind enough to join us for some red and blue discussion on the Sean O'Connell Show, brought to you by Canyon's Edge. Canyon's Edge Sports Pub in Holiday is the place to be. Right at the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon, great food and drinks, a wonderful atmosphere. And with BYU and Utah on the road, you don't have tickets. You probably didn't buy the plane ticket to go. Go to Canyon's Edge and watch the games there. Jerem Jordan, welcome to the show. How are you?
What up, Sean? Just two Cougar grads chopping it up,
Yeah, just two guys who have degrees from Brigham Young University. Marriott School of Business, in my case. Is yours? Do you have a master's degree also, Jerem?
I do not. No,
oh, wow.
I'm not a master like you.
Wow. So my degree from BYU is better than your degree from BYU?
Truly, it is.
Wow.
There's no debate.
I don't even know.
The Marriott School of Business. I mean, it's prestigious.
I feel uncomfortable with this, Jerem, if I'm being honest. It's just I never thought about that.
We're not talking business, Sean. Talking sport. I got a mere undergrad. In fact, school got in the way of my education while I was at BYU, but that's neither here nor there.
Like I said, the magic continues. James, our producer, was like, I can't believe that they pulled that thing off 4th and 8, and you still convert, and you keep it alive. And then I've seen enough of that from BYU in magical seasons to not be surprised by it. But was there any point in that game where your belief eroded?
I was just kind of wait and see. Honestly, I wasn't like at halftime on Twitter. It was nuclear warfare with BYU fans. They're like, "It's over. We suck. We're done. We can't stop them." It's like, just wait. We've seen too many crazy things in that stadium and from this program for you to walk out. Like, you don't want to be the person that's like, in 1980, I walked out of Jack Murphy Stadium and I didn't see the Hail Mary. Like, don't be that guy. So BYU pulls it out in a different way, which was refreshing. I've been asking for weeks, what happens when BYU loses the margin and they're down, or they just have to win in a different way other than like defense creates short fields, offense takes advantage. That's been like the number one awesome thing for BYU football. They won a different way, and that was Jake Retzlaff's greatest moment, and Darius Lassiter is going to come back in 20 and 30 years, and people will still talk about that play. It was special, man. But it was tense in the stadium, like sweaty palms, dude. Sweaty everything. And BYU pulled it out. It was great.
Lassiter, look, Retzlaff is going to get credit because he's a quarterback and they always get credit. And Lassiter, he broke 2 tackles to score that touchdown. Now, Oklahoma State, I can't imagine what the film session was like for those defenders who were in a position to make that tackle that saves the game and gets you your most important win and all that stuff. But Lassiter gets a ton of credit, man, because it was far from a foregone conclusion when he catches that ball, takes possession, that he's going to make it to the end zone. He broke tackles and got himself in.
Yes, he did. And you remember, what school was it at? They had kind of an old man they had in a wheelchair, and they brought him on the field in like the spring game, and everyone's diving at him, and they're missing him, and he scores. Like that's like what it looked like. It was so bad, like laughably bad. But Darius Lassiter made him look bad. Like he did that, and he gets in the end zone. Because you're right, when he catches it, he's still got to get in the end zone, and time's ticking. BYU has 1 timeout, but you never know if you're gonna are we going to get in the end zone on those 2 plays? Like, we're gonna complete a pass? You don't know. That's such a great moment. And before that, Jake Retzlaff's 27-yard run. It should be like Patrick Mahomes did that Sunday, by the way, where they're heading out of bounds and then suddenly they cut it up. Jake did it in line a little more, but it's like, quarterbacks, I would do that too, so that no one's going to touch you as you go to bounds, and then you cut it in.
Are you saying that
4th and 8? Yeah.
Are you saying Patrick Mahomes copied Jake Retzlaff? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that Patrick Mahomes, who has more interceptions than touchdowns, may have no. But there were 3 great plays on that drive, and it's like you have to complete that pass to Chase Roberts, who's open and literally jumping up with his arms in the air, by the way. Jake Retzlaff said, he was open for 5 seconds. I got to get him the ball earlier. You have to make all those plays, otherwise you're toast. So you got to make special plays to be a special team, and so far BYU's been just that, man. It's been special. It's 7 games in, and it's been amazing.
What does Las Vegas know that I don't, where UCF
Right?
UCF is a favorite against BYU? Now, I think UCF is a threatening team. UCF is the one that I circle on basically everyone's schedule as like, if you don't play well, these guys are going to make your day miserable. They can run the ball extremely well. They can possess the ball for a long time. They can keep your offense off the field. If you don't tackle well, if you don't execute, UCF's going to give you a bad day. But they're 2-point favorites, 2.5-point favorites. The line's moved all over the place this week against the BYU team that's flirting with the top 10 and undefeated.
Normally that line would tell you that there's some major injury for BYU, but I have not heard anything of the sort. I do think it's very odd. I actually love it, though, because BYU still, like, it's going to take a couple years of sustained success for BYU to get to this point, like they did, right, in the 80s and kind of mid-2000s of, like, okay, we're used to being – a favorite and a ranked team and blah, blah, blah. You're still operating with the no one believes we can do it mindset, and being a dog in the game is easy fodder for Kalani Sitake and Jay Hill and Aaron Ryder to use this week. So I kind of love it. And the fact that they're still outside the top 10, even though they probably should be in there somewhere, I don't know, 9 or 10, maybe 8, whatever. It's okay. Like, just keep winning, you'll climb. But it's kind of weird, right? There's no major injury that I'm aware of that would swing that line to that degree.
Yeah, it's very strange. Jeremy Jordan, BYU Insider, our guest here for some red and blue talk on the Sean O'Connell Show. BYU on the road in Orlando taking on UCF. I said this about a road trip for Utah Thanksgiving weekend, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but also kind of not. And it applies for BYU certainly as well. A trip to Orlando, and like it's a family destination, and the wives and the kids and everyone's going to want to go. It feels like it potentially sets up to be a distracting week for a player or two, a coach or two, if that's part of it. Has there been anything special addressed? Has Kalani Sitake been like, hey, it's still a business trip, no families are coming, because this is the game for Utah fans that I think everyone's going to spend a lot of money, buy the away tickets, buy the plane tickets, and it just those weekends always end up being bad. Anything on that front for BYU?
Kalani on Monday in his press conference talked about how his wife Timberly is from the area, and he said, "But we're not doing anything with them. I'm really sorry." He's like, "They already know. It's time to buckle down." In fact, I talked to someone who spoke with Kalani after the game, and he said, "We're going even harder than we were before." Because Kalani famously is like, "Hey, coaches, at 6 or whatever, you need to go home and go to your kids' games during the week." Like, that's not every coach, right? Kalani wants to make sure
that's no other coach. That's right? Only Kalani.
Like work-life balance for some of these guys is unique, right? You're not working in the office on Sunday. You can work at home, but blah 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 for the most part. So it's like, hey, he even set the tone on Monday, saying, "No, I'm doubling down on one. We got to go all in on what we're doing here. Let's keep this alive. But two, we ain't doing nothing. No butter beer for us in Harry Potter world this week. We got to go and win a game."
That's the right approach. Does this one boil down to, can BYU stop UCF's run? Right now, UCF is the third leading rushing offense in all of college football. And BYU, if they have a vulnerability on their defense, it has been their rush defense. Does it boil down to that matchup?
I would think so, because if you control the line of scrimmage, you typically control the game. And UCF scares the crap out of me for a million reasons, but Iowa State's defense was heralded as like elite, and BYU's was as well, and both got churned up last week by Iowa State and Oklahoma State. UCF to Iowa State and Oklahoma State against BYU. So certainly BYU, I'm hoping it was a wake-up call of like, okay, R.J. Harvey is Ollie Gordon II, like part 2. This dude is legit at 6.7 yards per carry. He's a home run threat in the pass game, too. He has the longest catch and rush for UCF this year, which is wild. And then Ja'Cory Brown, they benched K.J. Jefferson, who BYU beat last year. The year before that, K.J. looked pretty good against BYU in an Arkansas win in Provo. That Ja'Cory Brown with sacks is averaging 8.7 yards per carry. Like, what in the world? He is a problem, too. Last week, Oklahoma State said, hey, quarterback in the RPO, keep it a bunch, even if your name's Alan Bowman in your 7th year. And that gave BYU problems. So I think Jay Hill and this BYU defense last week was great for this week. They somehow won that game. And now you can be like, all right, we got to buckle down, because if you get ahead, honestly, it might be more of, can BYU get a lead that forces UCF to throw the ball? BYU secondary is number 4 in pass efficiency defense. They've been amazing. They have 12 interceptions, 16 takeaways, top 5 in the country. 10 different dudes have picked off a pass. It's like, wherever you throw it, you've had D linemen with interceptions. So I think, yeah, you got to slow down that run game, and then you've got to be able to run the ball too. I said today, this is very bold, but I think BYU will pull a Colorado and outrush UCF. I think what BYU did last week was notable. 7 yards a carry with LJ Martin and Hinckley Ropati, Jake Russell in the run game. If the offense can sort of help the defense out there, I can see BYU winning, but I think this is going to be a tough game, because UCF's thing is not whether they're going to be talented. That is a treasure trove of talent in Florida and in the South. It's whether they'll be disciplined and whether they'll slow BYU down on offense and keep their thing going, rushing the ball.
UCF, the 15th best passing offense in the conference. The only one worse is Houston, who, of course, Utah's got this week. We're just past the midpoint of the season. I think it's time for it. If they haven't already been adjusted drastically, I think it's time for everyone to readjust expectations for teams like BYU. And you know, a lot of that is because of some surprising performances from players, and some of it's not overly surprising, I suppose. But if you had to name an offensive MVP and a defensive MVP just past the midpoint, who do you give those to?
Offensive is interesting, because the easy choice is Jake Retzloff. Like, Andre Ware said on ESPN this week, why isn't he getting some Heisman hype? And it's like, I don't know why he's not. It's actually a good point. He's not putting up like bonkers numbers, but for BYU, it's like, can you give it to the O-line? They've been playing with 2 starters out, and you've thrown in third string Bruce Mitchell, who was playing defensive line like a year ago, and he started the last 2 and looked good. So I'd give it to the whole offensive line, frankly. They were able to get through. They played 5 different running backs in meaningful snaps. Like, they've been really banged up at that position. Now they're healthy. So I'll go offensive line if you don't go Jake Retzloff. And then defense, dude, pick your poison. I'd probably say Jack Kelly or Isaiah Glasker. Glasker's playing his way into NFL potential here, and then Jack Kelly is an NFL guy for sure. So one of those 2 guys. If you don't want to say Jacob Robinson, who has multiple picks, been good defensively this year. Mark Collins been an awesome corner. Pick your safety that comes up with an interception. It's been a well balanced breakfast defensively, if you will.
So coaches and players, they got to stay focused only on UCF. We in the media, we get to be irresponsible.
Oh, yeah, we can talk about Utah. Yeah,
and we can talk about, you got a bye week, and then you've got a road trip to Salt Lake City that, Jeremy, my biggest fear here on the home of the Utes and as a Ute graduate is that it doesn't feel much like a home game at Rice-Eccles Stadium, and that, people were already texting in saying, yeah, I'm selling my tickets to that game. And we already know how the rivalry dynamic has existed in years where the power dynamic was flipped, right? Where Utah was supposed to be so much better and BYU came in, and a lot of those games, even when Utah won, a lot of them came down to the final series, the final play, sometimes, the final 5 yards of a field. And I guess as a Utah fan, you got to be encouraged by that this year, because right now BYU looks like the much better team. But what is the Holy War shaping up to be, especially if both teams can win this weekend?
It's really interesting, is it not? Like, against TCU, I was like, not all those seats are filled. There's some disappointment for sure. And there were big expectations, obviously, for Utah. We expected that game to be an undefeated or one-loss Utah or something, right? So it's certainly different. But I think it's going to be electric no matter what. Like there may be some, sure, but that stadium's going to be rocking, and it's going to be home Utah. Like, that is a tough place to play. The must brings it. It's going to be fun. Like, and no matter how good the BYU team is, it's always a tough game, and BYU hasn't always walked out of there with a win, right? No matter what the 2 teams look like. One of the greatest games ever played there was LaVelle's last game, because both teams weren't going to a bowl game, but it was still crazy dramatic plays and turnovers. And if they had a review, Luke Staley would have fumbled, but there was no review, so BYU gets that fourth down to Pittman, like all that stuff. Like it's too emotional. It's too historic. It's too big for it not to be something interesting. No matter how good BYU or how good Utah is, like I cannot wait for that game. And it's hard to win up there. BYU has not won up there since 2006, amazingly. Like, and for BYU fans, it's funny because you're like, hey, we're sitting on a one-game win streak the last 5 years. Well, let's play a little more, and we will, which will be fun. But I can't wait, man. I think if Utah can figure it out a little bit, get a little bit of confidence now that you kind of moved on, right? Move past the TCU game, have a game with Houston. I guess play Cougs 2 games in a row, right? Get a 2-game Coug win streak is what Utah fans want.
That's what they're looking for.
Right? BYU's got a bye week right before, which is like good and bad, but I kind of like the Big 12 schedule makers being like, let's build the drama for Sean's show and Jerem's show for 2 weeks. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll like it or not. I guess it all depends on the results for Utah in Houston, not just win and loss, but how does it look? Last thing before I let you go.
That's a win, though, right? That's a win. You feeling nervous?
I don't feel overly nervous. I think it is a win. I opened my show today. Probably all the Utah fans tuned out like 6 minutes in because I was being a little bit negative. But like if you don't win, my take on Utah's road trip to Houston is all these last 3, they've been frustrations, they've been annoying, they've been, a bummer for Utah fans. But I don't think they really erode the culture. I don't think they hurt your foundation. I don't think that there's the long-term ripple effect or anything like that. If you lose at Houston, I think my mind changes a little bit on like the long-term effects it can have on this roster because of the transfer portal and because of how recruiting is done now, and also because of the success that BYU is having, not only on the field but with some fundraising and some NIL opportunities and things like that.
Yeah, it certainly presents itself like if Utah lost this week, there is a save your season feel though to the BYU game, is there not? Like no matter what happens, you want to win that one.
Yes, well, I said
BYU fans. I've heard so many BYU fans say, "Well, none of this matters if we don't beat Utah." I'm like, "Are you serious? If you told me right now BYU had to, again, if I didn't have a choice, BYU had to lose to Utah, but they make the Big 12 title game, give that to me now." That's what Utah had in 21. Lost in Provo, won the Pac-12, went to the Rose Bowl. That was awesome. That was great. You lose the rivalry game, that stinks, but there are bigger fish to fry here.
Yeah, the thing that can redeem your loss to a rival is winning a conference championship. We know that from the Ute perspective, and so
right.
and BYU is in that conversation very firmly. Before I let you go, non-football question. We all saw the reports that BYU is looking to be, in the market for elite basketball recruits, and AJ DeBonsa is the guy that they want, and apparently are willing to pay $4 to $4.5 million to get him to Provo. Some people are big mad about this. I think it's fine, right? Spend your money how you want to. This is what NIL has become. Is that realistic? Is that something like, are there actual legs to that, or is that just clickbait?
Kevin Young mentioned at Big 12 Basketball Media Days, which I was at and heard there this week in Kansas City. He said rarely are those numbers accurate, like they're often inflated. So that's one thing. And then the other idea is, it is interesting, too, for like the amount of money you're going to have for a whole roster. 2 years ago, a BYU assistant coach told me, hey, look, if we have the NIL, we could get players we couldn't get before. Like before they had to want to be a BYU, and now it's like, well, obviously it's got to be a good fit for basketball. Some of the off-the-court stuff and academics obviously still matter to a degree. But, like, if you have enough NIL, I said, how much is a Final Four team? He goes, $4 or $5 mil. Now, with inflation, who knows if that has gone up. But it's what I'm interested to know. So if you spend X on one player like that much, again, which could be inflated, right? How much do you have for the rest of the roster, and how does that affect the roster? I'm excited for the prospect of BYU potentially being in the mix, right, for one of the top, if not the top guy in the country. That's exciting. So we'll see what that all looks like. But from what I'm hearing, that BYU's got a real chance to be in the mix for that guy.
Who is the BYU football equivalent of Danny Ainge and Ryan Smith? Is there one?
That's a great question. There are lots of great donors, but are there ones who kind of have their face out in public and out front like that? No, there's not one quite like that. Like Oklahoma State has, Boone Pickens and and whatnot, and Phil Knight at Oregon. And there's not too many of that ilk, right? Like billionaire buddies are good to have nowadays, I suppose.
Yeah, I got to find some for myself.
Get them sponsors.
Let's go. Jerem, appreciate your time as always. Thank you. Enjoy the game this weekend.
Thanks, Sean.
Jerem Jordan, BYU TV, one of our BYU experts that we lean on for Red and Blue. Again, Red and Blue segment on the Sean O'Connell Show, brought to you by Canyon's Edge Sports Pub in Holiday. Right at the mouth of Big Cottonwood Canyon. Tell them OC sent you. Also part of our Big Noon coverage, brought to you by Mountain Land Supply. The Big 12 at noon. Visit them, mountainlandsupply.com. And at their new location, or even at the old locations. Great stuff available to you for any of your home improvement needs from Mountain Land Supply. All right, the Houston perspective on this Utah football game. Mark Henry joins us next from Texas on ESPN 700. Lee Sterling joins us in 15 minutes to talk about the big bets of the weekend. Sean O'Connell Show here on ESPN 700. Trying to get a little Houston perspective on this Utah versus Houston matchup as the Utes are on the road this weekend against the 2-4 Houston Cougars. Wins this year over Rice in non-conference play, and then a road win over the same TCU team that beat Utah at Rice-Eccles Stadium last week. So tough to figure out which version of Houston the Utes are going to see, but helping us to try to figure that out, Mark Henry, part of the Texas Top Prospect Show, also on to Mark Sports. Mark, welcome to the show. How are you?
Man, appreciate you having me, OC. Appreciate you joining, man. I'm super excited. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about, okay, so this Houston team has had its offensive struggles. We can relate here in Salt Lake City. Utah has been hapless and hopeless on the offensive side of the ball without Cam Rising in the lineup. What's been the biggest issue for this Houston offense in your mind?
Just consistency. We started off the season with Donovan Smith at the helm. UNLV comes in 27-7 at home. They go to, Oklahoma and hold the Oklahoma offense at the time that's kind of sputtering. But, maybe they're not a great team overall. But to go into Norman and play well and hold them 16 points, we thought we would kind of turn in the corner. Then, the Rice game at home, that's a rivalry, and they show up and do well, 33-7. They go on the road to Cincinnati for a Big 12 showdown in the first week of the Big 12, and they get 34-0, and then they come back to Iowa State, and they get blanked 20-0. Then you talked about TCU, and it was like the perfect storm. It was like it was coming all together, but there was a quarterback change. And Zion Chris came in, and I think he gives them more versatility being a dual threat at quarterback, whereas Smith is more of your pocket passer, a little bit bigger guy physically, but not as explosive in the run game. And I think that's the difference. When you saw Chris come in, it kind of changed the landscape and what they want to do offensively. Now, as you noticed last week, he goes out with an injury, and it's kind of the same lull-to-sleep type of offense against Kansas. And, we go down 42-14. And I think, listening to Coach Chris in his to Coach Friss, in his press conference this week, he's kind of optimistic as far as if Zion Chris is coming back. He did practice this week, but, Donovan Smith got some snaps, and he's been banged up. So the Cougars are really just looking for offensive consistency because, we have playmakers on the outside, Stephon Johnson. You got Joseph Manjack as well. You got to get the ball to those guys. You got to get it to them on the outside. Boogie Johnson is one of the most explosive players that you'll find in that offense, and so is Manjack. He scored a lot of his touchdowns and big plays on screens. Why not get him down the field, let him work the middle of the field? He's a guy that's can make the big play, as you saw last year with the last second play in the end zone last year. So it's just about being consistent for the Cougars. And, this is Coach Frisch's first year with this team. He got the job in December. So it's still, they're still kind of, it's like claymation. They're kind of putting this thing together. And it's just a work in progress right now.
We talk about teams from Florida, especially being in Salt Lake City. The recruiting landscape, it's now more of a hotbed than it was like when I was growing up. But everybody knows Florida. Everybody knows Texas. Everybody knows the kind of talent you're going to get, even on rosters that are rebuilding, even on rosters that are not necessarily power players in a given year. They're going to have talent. They're going to have team speed because you're sitting right there in fertile recruiting grounds when you're at places like Rice, places like Houston, places like UCF. So is the team speed for this Houston squad, is it on par with where you think it needs to be?
I think it could be better. You got to look at a guy like Strong that played well last week. Coach Frisch talked about him playing that dog position and what he has to do defensively, taking on tight ends, taking on the run game, and being able to be an advocate in the passing game. When you come to Texas, you know that Houston's been one of those fertile grounds. The city of Houston is a fertile ground for recruiting, and I think that's what you speaking about recruiting a little bit. Coach Fritz and his staff have concentrated on that in this 2025 recruiting class for the Cougs. But I think the playmakers are there. You have to, offensively, we're talking about, you have to be able to get the ball to those guys. And I think the offense has been sputtering this year when it comes to doing that consistently. I mean, you're looking at a team that's averaging 145 yards a game, and they're just not being able to get those big explosive plays. And he talked about that in his press conference this week about, excelling in the drop back passing game. That's one thing that they hadn't been able to do. Some busted assignments last week on the offensive line and within the blocking scheme with the running backs against Kansas cost them the game. They were -4 in turnovers last week, and that's the thing that he's really talking about. And when you talk about recruiting, it starts up front in the trenches. Texas is a big state for recruiting when it comes to offensive linemen, quarterbacks, the skill positions. I would say probably, DB and wide receiver, you have to go to the state of Florida. I mean, you got teams like Tennessee, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, historically recruiting the state of Florida for those skill guys. So when it comes to recruiting, you got to build from the trenches, and I think that's one thing, that the Cougs have to do is build from the trenches. They've been doing that the last couple of years, but again, this is Coach Fritz and his staff first full season. They took over in December, so it's still a lot of growing pains within that program as well.
Houston insider Mark Henry, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show. Big 12 Insiders brought to you by Larry H. Miller Ford in Draper, the Ford King. What's the scouting report from the Houston perspective on this Utah team? Obviously, we knew what the expectations were, preseason media poll. Everyone picks that Utah, will jump right into the Big 12 conference and potentially win a championship and right off the bat. Hasn't worked out that way, and they're not quite mathematically eliminated from championship contention, but it's a tough road to hoe the rest of the way for Utah. And knowing that this is a team you probably thought week 1, week 2 was going to be a certain type of way, and now here they are coming into Houston off a 3-game losing streak. What's the scouting report on these Utes?
Well, I had a chance to see the game out, Big 12 after dark against Utah and TCU. And TCU seemed to put a lot of pressure and change up coverages on Wilson. They were able to get some penetration. Utah faced a lot of third and longs situations. They were penalized pretty heavily in that game. And, TCU seemed to muddy it up or make it an ugly type of game. And I think defensively, that's what the Cougars are going to have to do. Coach Fritz talked about, the Utah Utes being a physical team historically. And that's the type of football that they played for a number of years. You can go back to the Alex Smith days, to the Jamal Anderson days. Utah's always been a team that plays physically up front and great defense. But I think what the Cougs are going to have to do, Wilson is a freshman quarterback. You're going to have to mix up the coverages, put some pressure on them, keep the Utes in third and long situations, and get them off the field. You have to do those things with the freshman quarterback coming into, a hostile environment. In the past, Houston's been a place that's been tough to play. And I think that the Cougs need to hang their hats on that. They hadn't been home in a little while as well, OC. They've been on the road the last couple of weeks. They had a bye week as well. So some home cooking, I think, will be good for the Cougs. I think, offensively, like we talked about in the beginning of the show, they have to get the ball to those playmakers. Snead has been a guy that Coach Fritz talked about this week in his press conference. His ability to run the ball and be a pass receiver out of the backfield. He scored on a wheel route last week. Getting the ball to their playmakers. Who's going to get the ball to the playmakers? That's going to be the key. With both quarterbacks being banged up, I think Chris gives them a little bit more option, with his legs, and he can pass the ball as well. But, it's going to be a game where who's the least penalized team and who has wins the turnover battle is going to come out in this, because both teams, like you talked about, the Utes are still mathematically alive in the Big 12, but, someone's got to break this streak right here. The Cougs have lost a couple of tough games as well.
Mark, appreciate your time today. We don't often get to hear from the Texas side of things, so thank you.
Absolutely. Anytime. I appreciate it.
Mark Henry, Texas Top Prospects Show, Houston Insider, as Utah moves to take on a Houston team that has given you 3 different quarterbacks. If you watch the entire season, they played 3 different quarterbacks this year, and some injuries potentially affecting their offensive output as well. But this is a game, as we've said many times, between 2 underperforming offenses. Take the under. Actually, we're going to be discussing some of our favorite wagering selections for entertainment purposes only with Lee Sterling from Paramount Sports. He joins us next on the Sean O'Connell Show. ESPN 700, Utah's #1 sports talk. Sean O'Connell Show continues here on a Friday. Big games coming this weekend. Massively important game for the University of Utah. Seems very winnable. BYU, somehow underdogs on the road despite their undefeated status, taking on a UCF team that has looked great at times and less than that at other times. Talking about all this and some of the other games maybe you have an eye on if you like to place a friendly wager or two. Paramount Sports, best handicapper in the business, Lee Sterling, joins us on Fridays, and he's with us now. Lee, how are you?
I'm good. Let's talk about some football. Also got an interesting UFC selection, and want to get also your take on what took place at the weigh-ins. I don't know if you watched them late last night for UFC 308.
Yeah, if you're referencing a little scale tomfoolery, we can get to that. But let's start with these football games. The Fighting Ashton Genties, the Boise State Broncos, are 3-point favorites against UNLV.
Yeah, and I mean, you talk about a running back. I think he's going to go maybe top 10, top 12 in the NFL draft. He ripped off almost 200 yards against the Oregon Ducks. Then go back to last year's Mountain West Conference Championship game against UNLV. He had a game there, ripped off over 150 yards, and I just don't see how UNLV is going to be able to stop this kid. He is that special. Unless they load the box, they're going to have to vary their coverages here and maybe hit on, a trick play or a special team score. I think Boise's the right side. I think they win and cover here 35-28.
I've been expecting Ashton Genty to come back down to earth, and it's just not happening. So there we go. Utah State, the Aggies have not been favorites a lot this year. They are favorites against the Wyoming Cowboys.
Wyoming Cowboys have so many injuries on defense. They're playing a couple kids that are like third and fourth string in the defensive backfield, and that is a recipe for disaster against this Utah State team. Now, Utah State trending really upwards on offense. They went from 0 to 21 to 29, 30, 34, and 45 points in 6 straight losses. But against Wyoming's defense, I think if they get to 30, 34 points, I think they win the game. Utah State 35-30 over Wyoming.
All right, we're going to save Utah and BYU for last. So I want to talk San Francisco, my 49ers. They've been hapless. They've been disappointing. Dare I believe that they are actually 4-point favorites against the Dallas Cowboys?
I don't get it. I think it's a bad setup. I mean, not only are there injuries everywhere. We're talking about the offensive line. Receiver position is just decimated. They may not even have Deebo Samuel. I mean, because of his situation coming out of the hospital with pneumonia. George Kittle's going to probably play, but he's banged up. Dallas is coming off of a bye, and this is a team, Dallas, that lost twice to the Niners in 18 months, one time in the playoffs. I think Dak's going to have a big game against the 23rd rated pass defense. I think the wrong team's favored. I like Dallas. Hate to say it, 30-20.
All right, another NFL game, the free play this week. Denver, much like Utah State, not always on the favorite side of the ledger here, but they're 9-point favorites against Carolina, who, if I'm not mistaken, is without Andy Dalton.
Yep. Yeah, without Andy Dalton, he got in a car accident. I mean, the best thing about Denver is they know what their young quarterback, Bo Nix, can do, and they don't put him in situations and plays that he can't execute yet. So I like Denver here, 24-10.
All right. Before we get to Utah and BYU, because you teased me with it, come on. UFC 308 this weekend. My favorite fighter on planet Earth is Max Holloway, and he's up against Ilia Topuria, who's still undefeated. Massive power, especially for that weight class. What do you think of this fight?
I think he's got a chance to stay in the fight here. He just, he's got to weather the storm in that fight. But the fight I really want to talk about is the Khamzat fight here. And, I mean, if you watch, I watched 2 different angles of the weigh-in. Not only did they give him an hour, they give him an extra hour. I guess you can do whatever you want in a fight like that. They gave Khamzat Chimaev, they gave him 2 hours, and the last minute he comes in, and the scale, the scale's still moving. I mean, they just gave him, they should have waited and let the scale settle. I think they just wanted to make sure that the fight goes off here. He has struggled making weight. He's struggled on short notice against Usman. Usman is a welterweight, Khamzat. He just slows down after big starts here. This is a 5-round fight here for Robert Whittaker. He's only lost three fights in 10 years, 2 to Adesanya and 1 to DDP. Just a really good grappler, better cardio, better kickboxing. He lost the first round. I think he's going to win the fight. I'm taking Robert Whittaker plus 200.
I think you're dead on. Khamzat Chimaev gasses, and Robert Whittaker is an absolute machine. He will push you into deep water on purpose, and that's, I think, what he's going to do, especially after watching the struggle with the weight cut. Everyone who's been a fight fan knows if you have a nasty weight cut, your gas tank is even further depleted. And how about the fact that Khamzat Chimaev came into the UFC as a welterweight, and then he's explored middleweight, and now he can't even make middleweight, at least not in Abu Dhabi he can't.
Really, really good points there. And, also there might be another factor. There might be something else on his mind. I think he has a son, a 1-month son who might have health problems. I think there's a lot on his mind, and I think Robert Whittaker plus 200 can get him. And if you're afraid to bet Whittaker to start, bet him after the first round. Might be a pick 'em.
All right, let's get back to the college football world. UCF, BYU. The line has moved around a little bit. BYU undefeated. UCF, though, the favorites at home.
So there is a system. Teams that are not ranked, that are laying points to a ranked top 15 opponent, over 64% end up coming in over the last decade. And this falls in that system. It is going to be hot. Going to be mid-80s for the game here. I think UCF finally found a quarterback in transfer Ja'Cory Brown. R.J. Harvey's run for almost 900 yards, almost 7 yards a clip here. I just think that the speed of UCF, and this is a tough place to play. You talk about like BYU being a tough place. The bounce house barely seats 50,000, but it's a really tough place to play, just like Oregon. I think UCF gets the job done 27-23 over BYU. Yep.
That could make things even more interesting in the Big 12 Conference than they already are. And, of course, as you know, Utah on a 3-game skid. If there's a get-right game left on the schedule, it's this one against a Houston team that has just not found their rhythm offensively. Utah favorites on the road. How do you see it?
Yeah, and the fact also Houston in the red zone offense, number 117 out of 134 teams. So they've thrown interceptions, they've missed field goals. I mean, the list goes on and on. I think this is a get-right game here. I like Utah. I think they win this game here 24-14.
All right, for our listeners, if they want more of Lee Sterling's advice than what they can hear here, where do they find you?
Just go to the website, ParamountSports.com, and at the end of October, we've won 7 of 8 weeks to start this season, went 12-4 since last Thursday. Anyone wants to hop on board? This is one of those rare 2-week periods where every single sport is taking place. I'm going to do this. I'm going to give you every game from tonight through Sunday night in football. That's going to be 10 to 12 plays. Baseball, first 2 World Series games tonight and tomorrow night. Hockey and also basketball. We've got 3 plays in the NBA, and one of them is on the Utah Jazz game. How about this? We're going to call it the Halloween in honor of Stuart Scott Booyah Bundle. $147 gets you 3 days of plays in all 4 major sports. Halloween Booyah Bundle, just $147, and also have a UFC card, 5 selections for $50, including a 50-unit max wager. We have won 4 straight cards, going for our 5th straight. Everything's up and available. Check it out. A lot of other free pick videos on huge games in college football. Notre Dame, Navy, Texas A&M, LSU, and also Alabama, Missouri, and Oregon, Illinois. ParamountSports.com.
Lee, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
You too, buddy. Take care. See you, Sean.
Lee Sterling, best in the business and on a hot streak this season in football, and you heard with the fights. That UFC 308 card is a great one, and that's coming from someone who doesn't want the UFC to just keep turning out great cards, okay? I want us in the PFL to gain a little bit of traction, but good golly. Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway in a main event, yes, please. and thank you. Before we take a break, we get to Andy Larson, who's going to talk some Utah Jazz basketball as the Jazz are back in action. I want to remind everyone that, look, 8 weeks away from now, you're rounding into Christmas time. You're rounding into consistent snowfall. You're rounding into cold temperatures. I know it's been unseasonably warm as of late, but it takes about 8 weeks from when you get those windows at your house measured to when they install the new ones. So let's do that before snow's a real consistent issue, all right? Advanced Window Products is offering $2,500 off 10 windows or more. But you got to get on the schedule. You got to get them out there measuring, and you got to get this process rolling. You do not want to be sitting around in January and February where we get some of those wild squalls and the crazy storms, and you have windows where the frames aren't seated properly in your house, where the glass has lost the seal between the frame and the pane or between the two panes themselves. Advanced Window Products, locally sold, locally manufactured, locally installed, locally serviced, lifetime warranty, and guys we trust, Jake and Nate, absolutely are going to take care of you for the life of those windows. You really have to give them a call. 801-850-9100, $2,500 off, 10 windows or more from Advanced Window Products. Little Jazz basketball with Andy B. Larson next on ESPN 700. Welcome to hour number 3 of the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700, and we welcome in Andy Larson, Utah Jazz NBA beat writer and insider over at the Trib, also does their data columns on a weekly basis. Andy, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Pretty good, OC. How are you?
Doing all right. Glad to have you on for the first time on the new show, so appreciate you swinging by as we get rolling with this Utah Jazz basketball season. Wanted to get your overarching thoughts from the first performance you saw out of this Jazz team earlier in the week.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, not bad. I think with maybe one or two exceptions on the roster, I think everyone played well. I mean, that Lauri Markkanen put up 35 points on 15 shots is really impressive. He's still really, really good. I thought Walker Kessler showed some really impressive, gains from last year, which was a really disappointing sophomore campaign. Like, he's clearly a lot bigger, a lot stronger now, and I think that's helped his game, helped him get some of the rebounds that maybe he bobbles last year. He turns into actual possessions this year. And then, kind of on the flip side of the coin, Keontae George really, really, really struggled and seemed to get in his head a little bit, maybe in his emotions a little bit, and, kind of force some bad shots. And especially the third and fourth quarter that were ultimately the reason probably the Jazz lost the game, right? Just shooting 3 of 18 isn't something you can do, certainly very often at the NBA level. So, some good and some bad, but ultimately they stuck with a Memphis team that's expected to be pretty good this year. And I think, so long as they play Lowry and kind of the rest of the good players on the roster, I don't think that this is like a complete tire fire of a team. I think that's maybe a little bit better than people think.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It might be a bad thing. It's a really fair question. And you can't be in this purgatory in year 3, right? Like, if they truly win 35 games again this year, even in that range, even 30 wins, it's a waste of a season a little bit, right? Like, in the end, you probably do need to look at this draft and say, hey, there are probably 5 franchise players at the top of this draft, and if you end up with the 8th or 9th or 10th pick again, you're not setting your franchise up for success in the way it needs to be. You're not setting up Lauri Markkanen up for success. You're not setting up, Will Hardy up for success. So I do think that, like, ultimately they'll have to pull the plug sooner than they did last year. Maybe the close losses can keep on coming for a while, and maybe that's what you need. I do expect the Warriors to beat them tonight, but like, if you do end up, as like a 5 or 10, 5-5 record after 10 games or something like that, it is time to evaluate more quickly than they did the last 2 years to actually decide which direction they want to go.
So how does that managed in a franchise in a realistic way, right? Because coaches have to coach for their jobs. They have to coach in order to win games, even when there's big picture ramifications, and even when an owner and a general manager is like, hey, we want a better draft position here. So maybe the coach can get on board. How does a player get on board? How does like a Jordan Clarkson get on board? Can they, or do you have to send them somewhere else?
I mean, they're like the Jordan Clarkson, Colin Sexton, et cetera, are, John Collins, are about as on board as it's reasonable to be, right? Like, they've had the honest conversations with those guys that, like, hey, yes, this isn't necessarily about winning the championship this year or even contending really for a playoff spot. But in the end, we're going to, in the meantime, we're going to ask you to be good soldiers for the young guys and help them develop, play in the system that you want. And then, to be honest, we're going to be looking for opportunities to trade you. And, I actually commend the Jazz's organization in that. And this year, their clarity on the message here that, this is a development season. We're not trying to make the 6th seed or something like that, has been relatively refreshing, given that I think that messaging has been lacking over the last couple of years. And then, I think ultimately the players are smart. Like, hey, they kind of get it. And yes, they want to be in a better situation than this. But frankly, no one else is paying John Collins $25 million a year. And Colin Sexton, I'm not sure he gets $18 million a year on his next contract. And Jordan Clarkson, same with him, and $15 million a year, right? Like, so in the end, they're in a good financial situation in part because of this, because of where the franchise is. And that's a little bit, it's like the Mad Men quote, that's what the money is for. Like, the money is for those guys being good soldiers, good teammates, good system players, and kind of letting the rest of the priority go to the young players on the roster that they think can actually be part of the next good Jazz team.
Okay, so, well, I'll accept that premise. I have no reason not to. You're very well informed on all these things. In regards to the young players, the guys that this franchise hopes will be part of the next iteration of good Jazz basketball, how do you coach and play winning individual basketball, like winning individual development, while losing team basketball? How delicate is the balance?
I see, and that one's easier to me because they're just not good enough yet to play winning basketball, right? Like, a lot of it, Keontae's problem, for example, in game one, some of it is decision-making for sure, and you can coach him on that, but some of it is also him missing shots that if he continues to miss, he will not be an NBA player. And so, ditto with the defensive end. These guys aren't good enough defensively. They're not smart enough defensively yet to be a solid defensive team because they just don't have the experience. I mean, like, Taylor Hendricks just hasn't played basketball long enough to know, like, the defensive intricacies of what it takes to play in the NBA. And to be a really effective team defender in the NBA. He's a very good ISO defender, but he's not a great team defender right now. And so, like, that to me is, hey, you teach the guys, the young guys, to play the right way and play winning basketball, knowing that in their first couple of years they're not going to be winning basketball players. And look, frankly, some of that is because they're not the best prospects in the world, right? Like, there are significant questions on all 6 of the Jazz's first and second year players on whether or not they're going to be in the NBA in 5 years. They're not, elite superstar level prospects, but there's a chance they get there through these kind of reps and through, again, hopefully good coaching. And yeah, look, we'll see what happens with it. But in the end, rookies just so rarely win in the NBA that you can just kind of give them the minutes and give them quality instructions. And even if they're doing the right thing, the results aren't necessarily going to follow.
Andy Larson, my guest here on the Sean O'Connell Show, talking Utah Jazz and NBA basketball. Jazz back in action against the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors played a 12-man rotation the other night and went all the way to the bottom of the bench and still found a way. Like, when you're talking about a team that was a borderline dynasty or a bona fide dynasty, depending on where you stand on that, who's now lost some of their foundational pieces, is that a sustainable, winnable formula for Golden State this year?
No, I mean, to be honest, and that's why they were looking to acquire a Lauri Markkanen in the offseason was they don't necessarily have enough talent to be a true championship competitor, right? Like, in the end, they did lose Klay Thompson. I'm a little bit skeptical of how good Klay will be this year and kind of post all the knee injuries that he's faced, but I also just don't think that, they have that second banana next to Steph Curry that makes a lot of sense. I like what they've done in the offseason, kind of on the margins and in filling out their depth. But you just can't play 12 guys all season long. Some of that is you can play with it, a little bit in the first game, kind of make everyone happy, and then injuries or whatever, you just have to narrow it down to probably 10, maybe at most 11. And then, yeah, again, they're just not talented enough in their top 5. I mean, we just saw the Boston Celtics win the NBA title with a pretty incredible top 5 and maybe even a top 6. That the Warriors have a top 1 and maybe a top 2. But just in terms of the rest of the talent in that 3 to 6 to 7 range, they're not NBA championship caliber. And so, that's why I think a lot of prognosticators, and rightfully so, kind of put them where they were last year and kind of in that play-in range. And then, maybe you have a good season, maybe you have health, maybe you don't have health, and all of a sudden you fall out of the playoffs. But given that there are 13 actually competitive teams in the Western Conference, including the Warriors, like, they can't take anything for granted, and I think they're not necessarily out of that pack by any means.
You used the terms first and second banana, and I love that. So I'm going to stick with that here and focus it back on the Jazz. Obviously, Lauri Markkanen is your guy. He's your all-star. Played that way the other night. You've committed to him financially to keep him around, and some people didn't love that idea. I did. I think, when you've got a player who likes being in Salt Lake City, you want to keep him in Salt Lake City when you're talking about an all-star like that. But for this season, who is second banana? Who is the guy who's the most important support piece for Lauri Markkanen?
Yeah, I mean, last year it was Colin Sexton, pretty clearly. He got the chance to play nearly all 82 games last year and played, I think, had the best season of his career. Can shoot, can drive, is feisty defensively. I think brings energy on both ends of the floor, which is nice. But if we're honest, like there's not a great answer. He might be one of the worst second bananas in the league, right? Like, nothing against Colin Sexton, who I think is a good player, but that's just the reality of it. And so there is maybe a room there for, if a Keontae George turns it around, if Walker Kessler keeps playing the way he did in game one, then yeah, maybe those guys are the second bananas. But the whole goal of the Jazz's franchise right now is to either find the second banana for Lauri Markkanen, and if we're honest, that's probably through the NBA draft, or to make Lauri into the second banana, and that's probably even better, and find a superstar in some other way. And if we're being honest about what the timeline of this project is, that's not this year, that's not next year, that's a couple years down the road.
Is there another way for the Jazz to find a superstar, get a superstar here besides the NBA draft in your mind?
Look, I mean, I think there is still that potential of to use Danny Ainge's phrase, the big game hunting trade, right? Like that a superstar becomes upset with his current organization and is traded somewhere else. The problem is a couple things. One, that doesn't happen quite as often as you would think. And when it does happen, it happens usually for a reason, or usually with older stars, right? Like James Harden or Kyrie Irving, or, those are the guys who have really moved. Damian Lillard. Those are the guys who have been traded in recent years. And the Jazz, I think, semi-understandably have not really gone for those guys because of their age or whatever other concerns, right? And I think that it's a really fine line to think you can trade for one of those guys. And one of the things I've criticized the Jazz's front office most on is kind of thinking that the big game hunting strategy was more likely than it was, right? Like, this idea that you're going to trade for Mikal Bridges and then sign Paul George, really, in Utah? Really? I think they've put too many eggs in that basket in the past. And frankly, I'm excited about the rhetoric that's come out in the last few months, which admittedly is spin, but is, in my mind, more realistic about, it's probably going to have to be through the draft.
Andy Larson for another minute or two here on the Sean O'Connell Show. This is away from the floor, at least, in terms of the topic of conversation here, but the Smith Entertainment Group is now running the state of sport here in Utah. Utah Hockey Club, Utah Jazz, Real Salt Lake, and now appears to be purchasing a top-flight basketball program at Brigham Young University. And there are a lot of different reactions to that, and one of those is, why are you making these donations and spending this money while asking for taxpayer dollars to develop things downtown that you're going to benefit from? I'm not sure, Andy, that those things belong in the same conversation. Someone donating to their alma mater with, whatever vertical they've got, in their personal bank account versus trying to revitalize downtown. But I understand why people have these certain feelings about that. You're a more analytical mind than me. So do those things belong in the same conversation?
I mean, I'm kind of with you. I don't think they do. And I basically think that it is okay and maybe even good that Ryan Smith is spending money on BYU, although, the haters will also accurately point out that the Jazz have the lowest payroll in the NBA. And I don't think those things are necessarily related, but I do think it's something to watch moving forward, as kind of the expenditures in both ways. I mean, frankly, Ryan has spent every dollar he's needed to in kind of team building for the Jazz. They're just kind of in this low period right now, and it's not like, hey, if he spent $20 million on, I don't know, Kyle Kuzma or whatever, that the Jazz would be better. It's just it is what it is, right? That being said, I do think that it was wrong and bad for him to ask for taxpayer money on the stadium district, and I think that is, I said this over and over again, but the economic studies could not be more clear about taxpayer dollars on stadium districts being a bad idea, being a bad investment for the taxpayer. And I think it's a little bit, frankly, selfish for Ryan to ask for that money from regular citizens, given that he is a billionaire. And I understand why the city did it. I understand why the city feels like they're over a barrel and that they don't want to lose the Utah Jazz. They don't want to lose the Utah Hockey Club. But if you look at, I think, the best billionaires and the best team owners in sports, they haven't asked for that money. They've instead said they privately finance it, including, by the way, Larry Miller privately financing the Delta Center to begin with in 1991. So I think he deserves significant criticism for the taxpayer money element of it. I think he deserves significant criticism for holding Salt Lake City hostage and keeping the Jazz and the Utah Hockey Club. I don't think he deserves significant criticism for donating to BYU's NIL cause and bringing like Igor Demine and trying to bring AJ Debonsa to BYU.
I've seen and heard some of the gymnastics that are done in, hey, if you can turn BYU basketball into this national powerhouse, that also somehow helps the Utah Jazz. And to me, that is a stretch. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, agreed, man. Yeah, I mean, if this were a farm system deal, then yeah, sure, great, that makes sense. And it helps the Jazz have a good Salt Lake City Stars G League program. Because the NBA draft exists, the Jazz don't just get the good BYU players. So yeah, I am skeptical. It's not Jimmer Fredette didn't work out in a Utah Jazz uniform. Jabari Parker didn't work out in a Utah Jazz uniform. Like it's just not the way the world works.
Before I let you go, how in are you on the Utah Hockey Club? I mean, you're already stretched pretty thin, but how in are you on UHC?
Honestly, pretty in. Like, I went to the game last night. I've watched every game so far. I'm lucky in that we've hired a great Utah Hockey Club beat writer in Bell Fraser, who I think has done a really, really, really good job covering the team. I've really enjoyed watching those games. Before these last two, really enjoyed the competitiveness of the games. I'm also, like I said, glad that we have someone else covering it. So it's something. I'm stoked that there's another hockey club, or another pro team here. Like, I grew up watching the Avs play with my dad on TV here, and so it's just kind of cool to have that here in the market. And I'm trying to be as invested as like physically possible, given that I also have this other 82 games and this other professional team that I'm paid to care about. So.
Okay, my last thing might be unfair because when you're a journalist in sports, it somehow affects the way that you can fan. But one of the things about the game last night, I attended as a fan, and I was like, oh, man, there's a lot of Colorado Avalanche sweaters here. There's a lot of Colorado Avalanche fans here, which makes sense. That was for a long time the nearest NHL squad to Salt Lake City, so whatever. And I'm like, it got me thinking, well, wait. Don't you have to lay that aside when your city gets its own team? Don't you have to say, all right, I'm a local, so I'm going to support the local team? Isn't that what we're going to have to do if baseball comes here? I was a Sharks fan of sorts, and now I'm a Utah Hockey Club guy. So what's your stance on like how you decide on allegiances once your team or once your city starts getting teams?
I'm with you. I think to me, a professional NHL team moving to your market is a big enough deal that you probably have to drop everything unless you have a really, really good tie to your previous franchise, right? Like for people who are from the Colorado area, right? Or flew in for the game or whatever it is, great. You can, I'm fine with your Avs fandom. And frankly, look, I'm fine if you want to maintain kind of your fandom of players or call it your second favorite team or whatever, right? Like keep watching Avs games, keep doing you, whatever it is. But I do think, like, to some extent, if a new team comes to your market, to your city, and you're calling, Salt Lake City and Utah your home and plan to for years and decades down the road, then, like, I think you should get in on the ground floor of this thing, right? To me, that's the easier and better fan move. But look, I also try not to tell fans how to fan, because everyone's got their own reasons for doing it, and we're all just wasting time here on this blue marble. Like, do whatever makes you happy. And if cheering for the Avs makes you happy, and it probably made Avs fans more happy last night, then good for you.
They had a lot more reason to be happy last night, that's for sure. Andy, thanks for your time. Appreciate you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Andy Larson over at the Trib, Jazz and NBA insider, also writes a data column for you. He's really, really good at his job. If you're not already following Andy B. Larson, or as I mentally pronounce it, Andy Blarson, then you should be on Twitter.
Blarson's great. I love Andy Blarson.
Old Andy Blarson. It's great stuff. All right, so Jazz are back in action. Utah Hockey Club was in action last night. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this when we're talking about Underdog Fantasy. I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about how I got a little bit too greedy, how I got a little bit too optimistic, but I did.
It's all part of the deal, man. You don't win every time.
When you're playing Underdog Fantasy, if you will sign up now, by the way, underdogfantasy.com, or download the app and put in the promo code OCShow, you could win $1,000 of bonus cash when you make your first cash deposit, which is pretty fantastic. They're also doing Boostober for the NBA games, so you want to play these NBA games. They give a 20% boost. There's actually an offer for a 60% boost on a cash pick'em right now on your NBA picks, and it's so easy to play. We put together my cash pick'em yesterday on the show, higher or lower than the totals that were set out for Mikhail Sergachev. I said he'd play higher than the projected minutes. He ended up coming in lower. I said that Dylan Guenther was overdue for some points. He'd get a goal or he'd get an assist. He got neither, so I missed on that one. And I said that Nate McKinnon would have lower than 4.5 shots because he averages lower than 4.5 shots. And that's the only one that I hit in the cash pick'em, all right? I also got a little bit excited about Victor Wembanyama playing in the NBA, and I took higher than his points, assists, and rebounds total of 41.5 for the game. And as you know, James Peterson, Wemby didn't do very well. He did not have a great game. So I missed, all right? But guess what? That's $5 into the ether on my Underdog Sports app, and I get to play again tonight. Cash pick'ems, higher or lower than on the player totals, on points, on assists, on rebounds. You could do it on fouls, on minutes played. You could do it on a lot of different things. It really is such a fascinating and fun way to engage with the sports that you're already interested. You're already watching. OC Show is the promo code. UnderdogFantasy.com. Download the app, OC Show, for your chance to win $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. All right, you have to be 18 to play. Must be present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. And if you're worried about your play at all, 1-800-GAMBLER or ncbgambling.org. Airing of grievances next on the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700.
Over the line, Krause is in. Krause, he scores! Lawson Krause!
877-353-0700. The Dish Pros text line is open for your airing of grievances. We've done a couple emergency ones on Mondays. We got to keep it on a Friday as well. Unburden yourself as you head into the weekend. It's going to be an interesting one. Big games for Utah and for BYU in football. Jazz are in action. Lots in the sports world, and even if your grievances don't come from the sports world, we still want to hear them. 877-353-0700. Big shout out, by the way, for the highlight on the lone goal for Utah Hockey Club last night. Lawson Krause scored, courtesy of the Utah Hockey Club broadcast, of course. 5-1 was the loss. I had a mild grievance to air last night about the number of Colorado Avalanche jerseys and sweaters I saw in the crowd. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to back off that because you can't.
Ungrievanced.
I'm degrievancing.
Degrievanced.
Because you know what? You're right. You can't tell people how to fan, especially if you grew up in the Colorado area. Then you probably get to root for your Avs.
So Andy changed your mind a little bit with his, I don't want to tell people how to fan.
Well, I do like to tell people how to fan, but I failed to account for the idea that there are actually a lot of like Colorado folks who now live in Salt Lake City. So yeah, I'll leave it. I'll let them have that one.
Yeah. And as I said earlier in the show, I'm not fully on board with the same mindset as you and Andy. I think that for me personally, my number one teams up to this point will still be number one when we get new teams in this market.
As evidenced by your stupid Reggie Miller jersey you're wearing today. Yes.
Well, that's the number one player more than team. But anyway, but as long as we're supporting the team, at least have them being your number two. If you're of the same mind as me, I think that'll suffice. And who knows? Maybe over the years, I change my mind if we get a baseball team and the Red Sox wouldn't be number one. I don't see that happening, but we'll see. It's an interesting conversation. I know Alonzo's on here, and we kind of speculated that he would not give up his Dodgers fandom for whatever team comes to Salt Lake.
Alonzo's joining us right now to air grievances.
What do you think, Alonzo? Yeah.
I don't hear
well, grievance number one, James is wearing a really stupid jersey. Like, that's grievance number one. Number two, the Clippers trainer who is suing the team for Kawhi's initial diagnosis to recover from his knee injuries, that whole mess. Beef with the Clippers. Massive beef with the Clippers.
Wow.
Arrested. Everyone with the Clippers should be arrested.
Okay, take it easy. All right. That's a grievance that goes too far. Part of airing a grievance is I don't think we're supposed to determine the punishment. We're just supposed to air the grievance. We're just supposed to put the angst out there.
Well, I mean, I'm not a Clippers apologist in any way, nor will I ever be. But that's egregious in my opinion because they just didn't accept his timeline. My guy's knees are tore up.
All right. Well, there's a grievance for you. James, do you have any grievances today?
Yeah.
Yeah, my grievances are all Monday Night Football doubleheaders. What are we doing? Especially because the second game is always the game that no one wants to watch. Just put that at 11 a.m. like the rest of the games. I do not like the Monday Night Football doubleheader. Now, here's the main reason why, though. There's 2 weekends where it makes a lot of sense. The first weekend of the season when everyone's just jonesing for NFL football.
Uh-huh.
But they don't put it on the first weekend of the season. So there's that. And the last weekend of the season when everyone's like, this is the last Monday Night Football that we're going to get. Might as well be 2. They don't do that either because of how it lines up with the national championship game in college football and ESPN being the Monday Night Football game. So if it if they lined it up logically like that, I'd be more on board with it. And if they had like 2 actually good games that people want to watch on there, I might change my mind. But as it is right now, can we be done with Monday Night Football doubleheaders, please? Thankfully, there's only one left. It's mid-December, so it's going to be a while. But I'm done with the way they do them.
Okay, I don't support that grievance. I think more football on Monday night's just fine. My grievance is with your wardrobe choice today, and Reggie Miller reminding me of May of 1995 when my 11-year-old self was real hurt by the fact that he scored 8 points in 9 seconds.
Well, Alonzo, I'm curious, is it just purely because he's a Bruin and you're fight on USC Trojan?
No, I actually like Reggie Miller. He's one of the best basketball players ever, right? It's just you I don't understand why you're wearing an Indiana Pacers jersey. I'm perplexed.
Because Reggie Miller's my favorite player of all time.
Grievance with James Peterson's unbelievably convoluted sports allegiances. They're just outrageous.
So convoluted.
Your player is Reggie Miller. Your favorite team is the Jazz, I guess. Your favorite baseball teams from Boston. Your favorite college teams from Ohio. It makes no sense.
I know.
None of it does.
I'm a very complex kind of fan, but also I don't care what anyone else thinks. I like those teams. I like those players. You guys can be local people all you want. I've chosen my teams.
877-353-0700.
I think he does grievance. I just got belittled by James Peterson.
Or otherwise grievances. The
Alonzo,
text line.
He tried to talk over you a little bit. He said he doesn't like how I just belittled him.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, Alonzo.
All right.
Listen, I accept it. You're a decent person.
UFC 308 is this weekend. Dana White, everyone knows, president of the UFC. He's the face of the company. And we had a huge fight in the PFL last week. Francis Ngannou, who was at one point the UFC heavyweight champion and came to the PFL as a free agent because he could not negotiate a favorable deal with the UFC. Couldn't get what he wants out of the UFC. Dana White was asked about, Francis Ngannou's performance and what it means. And, everyone wants to see John Jones versus Francis Ngannou. Everyone wants to see that. That's a fight that every fight fan on the planet wants to watch happen, and it's not going to happen because there's no cross-promotional availability. No one will do it. The UFC side won't do it. And Dana White was asked about Francis Ngannou's performance, and I went off and I told you how, the whole Francis Ngannou story earlier in the week, and Dana White then took the opportunity to say, this guy, he's only about the money, that's why he left. But then in the very next sentence, James, like literally maybe not the exact next sentence, but in the next 30 seconds of this same diatribe, he said, he's all about the money. And then he said, he actually had a bigger offer to stay here. So which one is it? If he's all about the money and you offered more, he would have stayed, right?
Yeah.
So if you're going to try to disparage somebody, and if you're going to try to talk a little bit of trash, and he's very good at it, typically, Dana White is, you got to keep the thoughts organized. You got to make sure the points line up. I have a disparity with bad logic and completely misleading, first of all, but also missing your own point.
Yes. You got to stay on point.
I don't like that.
Especially in election year. We don't like it when people don't stay on point.
I'm glad you brought up the election year, airing of grievance that because mostly of the political theater that's been going on as we rapidly approach Election Day, one of the craziest stories in the history of American and global exploration has gone so far under the radar it's not even funny. And I'm airing a grievance with that. The fact that finally, after 8 months in space, we have astronauts back on the planet. It's like a real-life version of The Martian where we had some astronauts stranded in space because the Boeing capsule that was going to retrieve them from the space station malfunctioned, had problems, had to go back to redevelopment. And these folks were stuck in outer space for 8 months. Did you even hear about this,
I did
James?
not. And
exactly.
That's a problem.
What are we doing? There was a great movie about exactly this, and it happens in real life, and we just pretend it doesn't happen. Now, either that's Boeing trying to, tamp it all down, because they've had a lot of really bad publicity as of late. And also, the conspiracies are that they kill people who are whistleblowers. Yikes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's scary.
Not good for Boeing.
That's so they didn't want anyone to know about the fact that they stranded astronauts in outer space. But your guy Elon Musk, the SpaceX capsule goes up, gets them, brings them back home safely after being stranded in outer space unexpectedly for months and months and months, back on soil, back on the earth. Splashed down successfully, retrieved successfully. One was taken to the hospital for precautionary reasons. Everyone's fine.
Okay.
Everyone else flew back to Houston. Should this not have been a huge story?
We should have known about this. It should have been easier to know this story than what it has been. And you're right. It's because everything gets buried by election stuff.
James, I'm going to need you to pull us some audio for me. 7516 says, my grievance is with Spence Checketts for comparing BYU to the Kansas City Chiefs. I need to know how he pulled that comparison.
We're going to have to listen to that.
I need to listen to that because I might echo the grievance. BYU is one of the great stories right now in all of college football. As I've said many times, I'm incredibly happy for mostly the coaching staff down there. There are some fans I'm happy for, but mostly I'm not happy for those fans. But calling them or comparing them to the Kansas City Chiefs, who are potentially going to do something that has never before been done in the NFL this season, that's a bridge too far. Although I should be careful because I don't know the exact nature of the comparison.
I mean, I'm off the top of my head. Is he saying that because they have had a number of BYU grads as part of that team, and
maybe
Andy Reid most notably?
BYU and the Kansas City Chiefs are similar because they both like Andy Reid.
And they're undefeated. And they're both undefeated.
In which case, that's an accurate comparison.
Yeah. By the way, we didn't get to this earlier in the show. We are on YouTube, and we do have a comment from someone who agrees with you and Andy about dumping your team if a team came here of the same sport. He said, I'm a diehard Yankee fan. That's unfortunate for him. His whole life. Been to multiple games, regular season, postseason. If we got a baseball team, I would dump them so fast, and our home team would be my new favorite.
Yes.
Which would be a good choice by him, considering he's a Yankees fan.
I put out this as a poll question, and maybe I can bring it in as a grievance. Did you see what's happening with the Oakland, Sacramento, Las Vegas A's? The reports are out there that their owner is looking for a $500 million infusion of cash, which would garner you, if you could make that investment, 25% ownership in the Athletics.
Oh,
now, that
Zachariah's already put up that cash, right?
First of all, I've watched enough Shark Tank to know that valuation is not going to be accepted. The Athletics right now are not a $2 billion franchise. They're just not. Now, this is an owner who is completely ridiculous, has had a combative relationship with the fan base in Oakland for years and years and years. Jed Lowry is everyone's least favorite person, and now he's moving the team temporarily to Sacramento and hoping to settle in Las Vegas, but the site plans in Vegas have popped up and gone away and popped up and gone away, and now there's all this discussion about whether or not he even has the money to make a move happen realistically long term. So my grievance is when you've got established owners from another market who have a long-standing history of quality representation and stewardship in their community and plenty of cash with no question, shouldn't the MLB force a sale here for the Athletics? My grievance is with allowing an owner who is now crying poor and has been guilty of malpractice at every turn. Why is this man allowed to own the franchise?
Yeah, what are we even doing? By the way, I chuckled. You saw me kind of smirking in here. It's because you said Jed Lowry's the owner of the A's, the former A's shortstop or third baseman. It's John Fisher.
Why did I say Jed Lowry?
I don't know. He's also a former Red Sox player, but he had his better years with the A's for sure.
Why did I say Jed Lowry? No, it's
anyway, John Fisher. Yes, but the point, I have a grievance for you violating your own grievance. You lost the point of what you. No, I'm just kidding. You have to have accurate points there, OC. No, but you're absolutely right. What are we even doing here? He clearly is not a competent owner, and it shouldn't take something like what happened with Donald Sterling, former owner of the Clippers, saying something truly awful and racist to say, hey, let's remove an owner from our league. If they're super incompetent, the league should be able to say, you know what, we're done with you.
I put a poll question out about whether people think the Athletics could end up in Salt Lake City based on this new piece of information, and 56% of the votes no, it's going to be an expansion team that comes to Salt Lake.
That's what I think at this point too. But Zachariah, last week we talked about it a little bit. He's like, I could see it being the A's because I am not confident that the Vegas thing's going to work out at this point.
That's really interesting.
That seems like a big mess, and it really does. But I still think they're going to end up in Vegas.
I think they're probably going to end up in Vegas because I think Vegas wants it.
Yeah,
I think the reason they don't want it is because of John Fisher, Jed Lowry. I think he's the problem. I think
Jed Lowry catching strays.
I think if John Fisher was not part of this, then the Vegas thing would be going a lot smoother. The reason I say that is because I've watched for 12 years now, while this whole situation in Oakland developed, with him hard to work with, impossible to deal with, unwilling to compromise, and the reason that the Oakland A's are no longer in Oakland.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sorry, Jed Lowry.
Any final grievances before we...
No, I think we're good.
Jed Lowry's going to call next week and air a grievance with me.
By the way, I neglected to mention the name of our commenter on YouTube there, Kevin. Shout out to Kevin for...
What's up, Kevin?
For being willing to undo a huge mistake and choosing to be a Yankee fan when Salt Lake gets a team.
Is Spence Checketts in the building today?
No, he is on remote. Let me find where. He is at Tim Dolly, about at 4500 South State Street, Tim Dolly Infinity.
This one coming in from 8094. I don't know where you get your news from. The astronauts' training was well reported by the New York Times, cable news, etc. My grievance is that people get their news from idiotic social media platforms.
And maybe that's why we didn't know about it.
I tell you what, cable news is an idiotic social media platform at this point. So what are we talking about here, ladies and gentlemen?
Thank you for sharing your grievance, though.
Grievance. Utah season ticket holders selling BYU game tickets. Don't do it, people. Don't do it. It's grievance to air from 5138. Only time I ever watch a Dallas Cowboys game if they're playing my team at the time. Hearing Dak Prescott say, "Here we go, every play," is so annoying.
Here we go.
Oh, that's a great grievance. I can't decide if I dislike Dak Prescott so much because he's a Dallas Cowboy, or if he was wearing any other uniform, I would also dislike him so much. I think it's because he's a Cowboy. Because I didn't have that feeling about him when he was with Mississippi State.
No.
And he was a pupil of Brian Johnson.
Yeah, my dislike for him has a lot to do. Most of it's not his fault. He's an overrated quarterback. He has been basically every year of his career because he's the quarterback of the Cowboys. It's mostly not his fault, but he's never lived up to the hype enough to be getting the amount of attention that he gets.
I will say this. One of the reasons I dislike Dak Prescott is because he was talking about how crazy he is and how he's just I just do things other people aren't willing to do, because he got a full leg sleeve tattoo in one sitting, which is insane.
Yeah,
But guess what he did? Went under anesthesia. Didn't feel any of it.
Crazy.
You could just afford stuff other people can't afford, Dak. You're not crazy. You just did the most convenient thing possible.
Is this a new Football Friday segment? Reasons why we don't like Dak Prescott?
I'm just airing a grievance. That's from months ago, but Dak Prescott got a full leg sleeve tattoo, which is usually like at least a 2-year process of getting, going in for a session, going back. Even if you go to a convention and you have multiple artists try to do it at the same time, it is hours upon hours upon hours. He just had himself put under.
And very painful if you can't afford to just be put under by anesthesia.
It's not that painful.
Or not that. Okay.
I mean, it's painful, sure, but like
I would think maybe more painful than your average tattoo.
Yeah, I don't know. I've only got one
doing
tattoo
all that at one time, I would think.
Anyway, grievances have been aired. It's the Sean O'Connell Show. We'll wrap things up next on ESPN 700. Wrapping it up here on the Sean O'Connell Show. We got to go quick. 877-353-0700. Lemon Shark Poke gift card. Lemon Shark, sponsor of the hot lunch. Fresh fish, wonderful veggies, perfectly cooked rice. Poke, if you're not familiar, it's like sushi in a bowl. It's amazing. Right here on 300 South, about a block and a half east of our Broadway studios in the Judge Building. All right. 877-353-0700. Whoever can answer this question correctly first. University of Houston, Utah's opponent this weekend, is ranked where in pass defense in the Big 12 Conference? Talked about that early in the show today. Where does the Houston passing defense rank in the Big 12 Conference? If you get that answer right, we'll give you some Lemon Shark Poke gift cards. James Peterson, adequate job today despite the
Thank
jersey.
you.
Don't ever wear it again. It's a bad idea.
I will be wearing it again.
It's a bad idea. You shouldn't do it. Big thanks to everyone who joined us on the program. Everyone enjoy your weekend. Thanks for listening to the Sean O'Connell Show. Spence Checketts and The Drive are next on ESPN 700.